in 2025.
Okay, I like it. Yeah, I mean, you've got, and I think what's interesting about even the first round pick in Michael Williams last night, Sterling, was, I know we like edge rusher, pass rusher, get to the quarterback, sacks, all of that. Definitely is not yet like the most polished pass rusher. But John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan said last night they think that Michael Williams, the best edge setter, not edge rusher, but edge setter in college football. So, and I know something that you said, it feels like the Niners are preparing to maybe play Michael Williams at times on the inside, perhaps similar to what they did with Eric Armstead. I know eventually Armstead had a full and total move to the inside, but even when he was playing on the outside, they at times would play him on the inside. So Michael Williams, as far as edge guys go, Sterling, one of the better guys in this draft against the run, and now you get a true run stopper in Alfred Collins. We're talking a lot about the trenches specifically, or more generally, but when we dive specifically into the kind of players they're targeting in the trenches, Sterling, it does feel like they are putting an emphasis on, all right, goal number one is stop the run. We're going to hope that we can get to the quarterback. We're going to hope that Nick Bosa can do that. We're going to hope that we get help from elsewhere. And we're going to hope that, this defensive staff, led now by Robert Saleh, again, can teach these guys to get to the quarterback. But it does seem like plan one, which it should be, is stop the run and try to make opposing offenses as one-dimensional as possible.
It seems like the San Francisco 49ers, a la J-Lo in 1999, they've had enough of the rushing attack going against them and just bashing them every single Sunday. You saw so many times last year, late in games, the defense couldn't get off the field. Or early in games, they were getting gashed, and the offense had to find their way back into football games. And ultimately, this run defense needed to have a makeover. And this goes back not just last year, but 2 years ago. San Francisco has yet to find a solid run defending edge rusher, but also on the interior. Yeah, you have guys like Evan Anderson and Kalia Davis and Jordan Elliott, but you don't really love all of those players or any of them, but you really love what Alfred Collins brings to the defensive line room. Yes, a proven player, again, going back to the winning culture that Michael Williams brings from Georgia, Texas, a very winning culture out there with Sarkisian and company, but only 23 years old, played 65 games the last 5 years. So you talk about, having a player that's durable, has gotten it done, has won plenty of football games, and again, at Texas last year, an 85 run defense grade per PFF. He's a space eater. Once again, like Michael Williams, hoping to free up space for Nick Bosa on the opposite end.
Well, what's interesting is the Niners aren't just, they aren't adding to the last year's group, because they just essentially got rid of almost everybody that was starting on that defensive line, really, other than Nick Bosa. And I think it went kind of away the way that it went with the Niners last year, and we do have an interesting pick that I'm going to get to in just a second, Sterling, because I know you have thoughts. But the way that the Niners defense worked last year was, even on the interior, they were guys that were more so focused on rushing the passer as opposed to stopping the run. And the Niners' run defense was as bad as it has been in a really, really, really long time. And if you're looking at maybe one area, one facet of this team to point to their 6-11 record, it might be the run defense. So it makes a lot of sense that the focus at this point is the run defense, even if you are drafting from the edge position, which is the case for Michael Williams. Then you get in the interior today, early in the second round with Alfred Collins, defensive end, defensive tackle, both out of the SEC, one from Georgia, one from Texas. And now you're gearing up for a couple of picks in the third round. We just got pick number 59 overall, Sterling. The Baltimore Ravens, they go with the guy who many thought was maybe one of the best edge rushers in this draft. Some off-the-field concerns and questions. It goes Mike Green, the edge rusher to the Baltimore Ravens. Sterling, you know a ton about this guy. You brought him up last night as potentially a guy that could have gone in the top 10. That's how talented this guy is out of Marshall. But he falls, and ultimately it's the Baltimore Ravens that are the beneficiaries. Maybe they take a bit of a chance with those off-the-field concerns, but he goes 59 overall to the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, Mike Green is a tremendous talent, right? At Marshall last year, a 91.6 pass rushing grade, a 90.2 run defense grade, 67 pressures, 17 sacks, a 21% pass rush win rate.
That's pretty good.
He's a freak athlete. He's a guy that at the Senior Bowl was just pushing everybody around. I think he practiced for one day, then said, deuces, I don't need to be here anymore. And that tells you a lot as to the type of player he is. However, there's a lot of questions as to what kind of person he may be. A couple of assaults have come up that may or may not be true. There are allegations. And obviously you take those things very seriously. He was kind of quietly kicked out of Virginia and moved to Marshall, but nothing came from it. So there was some, what's actually happening. There is kind of some fog of war of like, we don't really know what's actually going on with Mike Green. And so the NFL spoke on two players last night in very different degrees. Shadur Sanders falls based on talent. Mike Green falls based on the personal traits that he has off the field. And obviously I'm not comparing Shadur off the field to Mike Green, but you're seeing what the NFL thinks of those two players. Of Mike Green, for all the talent he possesses, is not worth a risk in the first or second round. And you see the Ravens, who I think for a player that I'm sure in his own right may say he's made some mistakes, you got John Harbaugh now, who's one of the best head coaches, been around for a long time. And I think if there is a coach you want to have a player like Mike Green go to, it is a player or a coach like John Harbaugh, who has his head screwed on right. The AFC North usually can deal with the character concerns of Mike Tomlin as well. So I think it's a good spot for him, but you're hoping that whatever past he may have is left behind him and they can find some answers down the road.
Yeah, so Mike Green, 59th overall, towards the end of the second round, the edge rusher out of Marshall goes to Baltimore. It was a name that I know a lot of Niner fans were throwing around once he was still on the board at 43 overall. Based on everything you just laid out in terms of the off-the-field concerns, I think that almost just entirely takes him off the Niners board. Doesn't matter maybe at all where in the draft he falls to. Niners just do not mess around with that kind of stuff. Once they got burned their first draft, with Reuben Foster out of Alabama, I don't think they've really ever wanted to do anything similar to that again. So Mike Green, he's off the board now. The Niners are approaching being back on the clock. We've got only 4 picks left in the second round, make it 3 after Trey Amos, a corner from Ole Miss, just goes to the Washington Commanders. Right before that, 60th overall pick, the Denver Broncos picked R.J. Harvey, a running back out of UCF. With those 2 picks, we've got 3 picks left here in the second round, and then the Niners will be on the clock with the 11th pick in the third round, which will be the 75th overall selection. The Niners do have another pick later on in the third round, a special compensatory pick. We'll see if they make both of those picks, if they trade one and move up further earlier into the third round, or maybe one of the final picks here of the second round. We will see. We'll, of course, keep you updated. I did want to read something for you, Sterling. This is courtesy of The Beast, which is via The Athletic. Great job putting this together by Dane Brugler. I can't even imagine how long this takes. It is literally 500 pages long, this entire draft profile. Let me read this snippet on the newest 49er, Alfred Collins, defensive tackle out of Texas. Quote, a coordinated big man, Collins plays with natural power and does a great job as a two-gapper, stacking, peaking, and grounding ball carriers between the tackles. His hands are more heavy than disciplined, and he struggles to root himself versus doubles because of his tall pads. Overall, Collins is still learning how to maximize his size and talent, but he took a sizable jump this past season and shows the physical traits to be a disruptive force, especially against the run. He will provide immediate depth as a rookie, and his snap count should increase with experience. That is the quick summation there from Dane Brugler of The Athletic via The Beast about the newest 49er, Alfred Collins, the defensive tackle. One thing that stands out to me, Sterling, is, quote, he will provide immediate depth as a rookie. He might not be a depth piece for the 49ers. They might be looking at him to start, or at least he's going to have the opportunity to win a starting job in camp.
Yeah, I really wouldn't be shocked with how polarizing this draft class is that San Francisco didn't have a first-round grade on him. We don't know exactly how many players they had in 23 first-round grades this year. Obviously, a lot of positions they didn't need. They weren't grading Shadur Sanders, I'm sure. So I would not be shocked. And to not push back on Dane Brugler, because he's awesome and he's great, and the beast is aptly named because he's a beast himself at scouting. He is right, though, that Collins certainly has some pad level concerns where he plays too high. When you are 6'6" on the interior, you get smaller guards that can get to your chest and push you around. But he's an extremely strong player, and I think this goes for Micah Williams as well. San Francisco is kind of banking on their best football being ahead of them, not behind them, and that matters when you have Saleh and Chris Kocurek in the building, who I think are, if not the best, one of the best tandems of defensive coaches in football. We saw what they did with Eric Armstead and DeForest Buckner, getting those guys to be, Pro Bowl, all-pro caliber talents, and I think that, well, not in year one, and I'm not going to put that pressure on those guys, but Alfred Collins certainly has a run stuffer written all over him if he can fix the pad level. But if he can also fix the pad level, then you talk about maybe an adequate pass rusher as well. I don't think he's someone you have out there on third downs, third and longs. San Francisco desperately needs to find that player still in this draft, so I'm hoping either on pick 75 or pick 100 or maybe in round 5 or 4 they can find that player. But Alfred Collins, I think, is going to have to play on first and second down immediately for them this year, knowing it's Jordan Elliott and Evan Anderson and Kalia Davis, who frankly are not very good for this team. Yeah.
So a lot is going to be asked of Alfred Collins immediately. He's going to be 24 in October. He was a fifth-year senior out of Texas, 332 pounds. He's 6'5" plus. So he's a big dude that you just throw there in the middle of the defensive line. And one thing that stands out to me, Sterling, looking at a little bit of tape and just looking just at the numbers and the statistics that he did put up, where he took a really big jump this year. I think this is overall maybe awareness. 7 passes defensed. This is a guy that you put in the middle of a defensive line, and he's got a good awareness of, when the quarterback is, gearing up to throw the football. He can get his big paws up there and knock it down. He's got a really long wingspan. He's got big hands. He can disrupt the passing game in that way. He had an amazing interception I saw early in his career in 2020. He's around the ball a lot, only 5.5 tackles for loss, just the 1 sack. He's not like a pass rusher from the defensive tackle spot. He is a guy that's going to ideally eat up a couple of blockers, free up Fred Warner, allow Fred Warner and whoever is playing linebacker alongside Fred Warner to get in on the tackles and to stop the run game, because so much of what D tackles do, Sterling, and really good D tackles, we point to tackles for loss, we point to sacks, but it's just, do you take on 2 guys consistently, and can you keep a clean lane for your all-pro linebacker to cut through the offensive and defensive lines, meet the ball carrier in the backfield, and wrap him up? If your linebacker is consistently being touched, whether it is a full-on block or just, a little shove to the side, it makes it so much more difficult on Fred Warner or any linebacker. And I think there was this conversation this past year. You and I had it all the time on Overtime after games. Is Fred playing up to his standard? Is he having as good of a season as normal? And he was dealing with that ankle injury that he suffered early in the year against the Patriots. That might have been part of it. But so much about Fred and maybe not looking like the all-pro that we know him to be, it's because the D tackles up front weren't doing as good of a job as the Niners have had in the past. If your D tackle is only taking on 1 blocker and one of the guards or the center can get to the second level and put a body on Fred Warner, of course Fred's not going to be as successful taking down a ball carrier or getting out in coverage or whatever the case is. So the goal for Alfred Collins shouldn't be, I'm going to get X amount of TFLs and sacks. Like, of course, you want all of that, but it's just be a big body, be a force, eat up blocks, and make life easier on Fred Warner. That should be his goal.
Well, and on top of that, both the guys San Francisco has drafted so far are powerful presences on the defensive line, where in previous years it kind of felt like Leonard Floyd, D Ford, you had your Arden Keys, Ebukam. A lot of those guys really weren't your powerhouses. They were good in their own way, in their own right, but San Francisco too often last year was bullied on the defensive line. And I think you are seeing San Francisco trying to turn that tide back in their favor, where, again, the Rams, the Eagles, if you can bully the opposing offense, you have a pretty good chance to win. And I think San Francisco views Alfred Collins and Micah Williams as two people they believe at least on early down plays can bully some people on the interior and on the edge and hopefully wreak some havoc on the quarterback, because if you collapse pockets, you win football games usually. Now, mobile quarterbacks are running rampant in the NFL, but again, some of those guys don't have great pocket presence. You get pressure on them, your chances of winning go higher and higher and higher. You can get takeaways, you can get sacks, you can get fumbles, and look, we have seen the identity of San Francisco shift. It was defense heavy, then it was kind of a mixture, then last draft it was more of the offensive stuff, but this year it is all defense in a good way for San Francisco. As the Chiefs get a player that San Francisco happened to love
tell me about
on
him.
Their top 30 visit, Omar Norman Lott. So KC also having a great draft, unfortunately, today on day 2.
Omar Norman Lott, defensive tackle out of Tennessee, is the pick for the Kansas City Chiefs. That's the second to last pick of the second round, so we're nearing the very, very, very end of the second round of the draft. Round 3 still to come tonight. Round 2 took a little more than a couple of hours, so I would expect something similar here for round 3. We're with you all the way until 10 o'clock, so we will get the full result here of round 3. We're expecting 2 Niner picks. They are scheduled to make 2 more picks. We could see a trade. Looks like very unlikely a trade back to the end of the second round, but we could see maybe the Niners consolidate a couple of picks. Maybe they move up to even earlier in the third. Maybe they take a couple of their later picks and the second, third round pick they have here and get a couple of picks in the top half of the third round. We shall see. The Niners, though, are about 12 picks away from making their selection here in the early in the third round. Right before Omar Norman Lott, the defensive tackle from Tennessee, another defensive tackle went, Shamar Turner out of Texas A&M. I'm just circling like every D tackle, every edge right now, Sterling, because even with a couple of defensive line picks, 1 edge and 1 D tackle, there is still a lot of need for that for the 49ers. We might see the Niners branch out to a different position group coming up here in the third round, and I would not be surprised. But considering the depth in this defensive tackle group, we might see more. But we're almost through the second round so far, Sterling. I know there was a handful of names that came off the board before the Niners picked that probably frustrated you. I know you're happy with Alfred Collins, but in a perfect world, what were you hoping for in the second round for the 49ers?
You know, it's funny enough, the one player I wanted instead of Alfred Collins is still there. Darius Alexander, defensive tackle from Toledo. He is more of a complete player on the interior. He can rush the passer. He can eat space. And he kind of fits that, the lengthy defensive lineman they've been going for in Williams and Collins. So fingers crossed, the guy that I want is still on the board, so you never know what San Francisco could do. He was in for a top 30 visit, but nothing really has shocked me. I'm pretty pleased with who they got in Alfred Collins. Obviously you like some players like Jaden Higgins, but San Francisco, the need for a receiver really isn't there for them that early. So again, I know we oftentimes get greedy or jealous of what the opposing teams do, but I think fans, and including myself, should be pretty pleased at what happened so far throughout 2 picks for San Francisco in this year's draft.
I mean, first pick of the second round was Carson Schweschinger, linebacker out of UCLA. I know I'd seen him mocked a couple of times to the Niners. The easy comp is, well, you lose Dre Greenlaw, get another linebacker in there, and Carson Schweschinger out of UCLA, one of the more highly rated linebackers. He goes to the Browns, first pick of round 2. I know you're gonna have to help me out with the pronunciation of the last name. The offensive lineman from Arizona went to the Dolphins early in the second round. I know you were high on him, and the Niners could certainly use the offensive line help. We talked about that last night. We will talk about it more tonight, I'm sure. Maybe we see the Niners pick an offensive lineman here in the third round. But you're right. I mean, Alfred Collins, considering who was on the board and considering what they need, pretty darn good pick. But it would have been interesting if a couple of these other guys that the Niners seriously could have used some help in those positions fell. It might have made for a more difficult decision, but I don't think anybody's complaining about a defensive tackle, and a big one at that, who you hope to really shore up the run game.
Yeah, I think maybe if you're of the group that you want to get an offensive tackle or guard, I think Jonas Savaiinaea, the guy you're referring to, went to the Dolphins. He's a great player. He was going to be probably this team's left guard in year one had he been drafted by San Francisco and played right tackle next year once Colton McKivitz is a free agent. So that's a big miss. But again, a guy goes 37. The odds to get him are pretty low when you're picking at 43. And I think there's other players there. Maybe, JT Tuimoloau, Ohio State edge rusher, but you already got Micah Williams, so is it redundant? Not similar players, but the floor is higher for a player like Tuimoloau, or the ceiling isn't as high. Ariante Ursary goes to the Texans. They get their tackle. Again, one guy San Francisco liked during their top 30 visits. So there's some hemming and hawing you can do about which prospect you like, but overall, again, a pretty good day two thus far, and I'm hoping in the next 10 picks or so it gets even better for San Francisco.
Yeah, we'll see. The second round is officially over. The Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles just made their pick, 64th overall, to close out round number 2. They go with Andrew Makuba, a safety out of Texas. That closes the door on round 2. And that means the 49ers are nearing being on the clock. They have the 11th overall selection in round 3, the 75th overall selection in the 2025 NFL Draft. We will talk more about the plan here in round 3 and what the stage is setting for the 49ers the rest of the weekend in the NFL Draft. All right, that's Sterling Bennett. I'm Marc Grandi. Time for a break here on Draft Night. Draft Night number 2. We got time for your calls, your texts, your YouTube chats, everything. Hit us up, 888-957-9570, and on YouTube, youtube.com/957 The Game. We got plenty more to get into. Sterling and I are with you until 10 o'clock, reacting to everything Niners and the NFL Draft. We're back with more next on 95.7 The Game.
NFL Draft, the San Francisco 49ers select Michael Williams, defensive end, Georgia.
Now back to Draft Night on 95.7 The Game.
Welcome back. Sterling Bennett with me. I'm Marc Grandi here. It's Draft Night on 95.7 The Game as the third round is getting going here from Green Bay, Wisconsin, as we inch towards the Niners pick, 75th overall, 11th pick in this third round. Sterling, a guy you threw out as a potential pick in the second round, who the Niners did not take, and then who lasted for the entirety of the rest of the second round. You had to say his name, and then he's the very next pick. The New York Giants, they begin round number 3 by picking Darius Alexander, defensive tackle out of Toledo. It would have been amazing if he had made it all the way back around to the 49ers once again, but that was just a pipe dream, a classic case of not expecting it to happen. Then you start getting some hope, and then it happens and he doesn't get to you as expected, and then suddenly you feel really disappointed. But Darius Alexander does not quite make it. That's the Giants pick. The Chiefs had made a pick. The Browns are currently on the clock, third pick of the third round. We are inching closer to another 49ers pick. But Sterling, that Darius Alexander pipe dream was just that, a pipe dream.
My heart is broken, Mark. I can't function. The show's over. I can't do this. But no, I mean, look, the Giants were a team that they walked into this draft knowing they were probably going to get Abdul Carter. You have Carter, you have Dexter Lawrence, you have Brian Burns. Could they still trade Kayvon Thibodeau? That feels like it's dead now as well. But now you get a space heater on the interior next to Dexter Lawrence, and you give Brian Daboll a future quarterback, and you give him 2 really good defensive linemen and this draft class's best edge rusher. So they have a tough task playing Dak Prescott and Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels.
Yeah.
2 times a year, so they have their hands full, but they are doing what they can to hopefully get out of the cellar of the NFC East, although I still think they're a pretty bad team next year, but that's just me.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. So the Cleveland Browns currently on the clock, third pick in the third round. Niners have the 11th pick in the third round. We'll, of course, keep you updated as the draft moves along. I do want to get to a couple of questions that I see popping up on the Boxer and Gerson work injury attorneys text line. We'll get to that in just a little bit. But I do want to spend just a second here, Sterling, on Shadur Sanders. I know that we talked about him a little bit last night. We're now through 2 rounds entirely, and he has not yet been picked. I know you and I are not big believers just in his on-field abilities. There was, the concerns of, wow, he had one of the most terrible interviews that I've ever been a part of. One anonymous NFL executive put out there, and that was in the lead up to the NFL draft. Regardless of how you feel about Shadur Sanders, one as a person, or I guess most importantly as a player, and then as a person, put that aside, I'm just a little surprised, given all of the quarterback hungry and needy teams, that we haven't seen him drafted. It's not like there hasn't been instances in the past where a quarterback that we all think is not very good goes in the top 10, because that's just what happens in the NFL draft. And Shadur Sanders is somehow still on the clock, and we are approaching pick number 67 right now. In fact, we just got pick 67. It is not Shadur Sanders. It is Harold Fannin Jr., a tight end out of Bowling Green, who I'm sure Sterling wanted to be a 49er as well. But still, Sterling, no Shadur Sanders, 67 picks in.
The Shadur conversation, it's really interesting because I think the media really is one of the key factors into why this thing got so overblown. Yes, I think Shadur should have been picked at this point. We're at pick 67. He's the third best quarterback in this year's class when it comes to upside and it comes to, Shadur is going to be a good quarterback at the NFL level. It may take some time to get there, but his skill set certainly translates. But I do think the media, they did this. Like the national media did this, whether it is, bigger networks, national media, it was like they could not take his name out of their mouth. Obviously clicks and ratings certainly sell, and the fans are infatuated with Deion Sanders, primetime Shadur, and what Colorado did at the collegiate level. It was really great stuff, and all credit goes to what they did out there. But I think you have to look at it from a logical standpoint, though. The Titans were going to get Cam Ward. That was a given. Are the Saints really in a position to put Shadur Sanders in at quarterback? No. You take a 26-year-old quarterback in state who may or may not be good. They're eyeing next year's draft class with a new head coach and a new GM. The Giants trade up for a higher upside quarterback in Jackson Dart, where they didn't even believe in him at pick number 2 or number 3. So it's not as if the NFL is telling Shadur he's not a good player. It's just that in a defensive-heavy class where it's a backup quarterback probably in year 1 that's going to come with a ton of baggage with his father and the limelight, and most teams don't want that, especially if you're rebuilding. Most teams don't want distractions with a new head coach, a new regime, while you're trying to make a roster built for a young quarterback. So I'm shocked he's fallen this far, but I'm not shocked he fell out of the first round whatsoever.
Yeah, I'm with you. Latest pick, 68 overall, 4th pick of the 3rd round, the Las Vegas Raiders. They go cornerback Darian Porter out of Iowa State. That's the latest pick in the 3rd round as we are nearing the 49ers. Up next is New England. Then you've got Jacksonville, New Orleans, Buffalo, the Jets, and Denver before the 49ers pick. 11th pick of this 3rd round, 75th pick overall. Okay, I want to ask you a couple of things from the Boxer and Gerson Work Injury Attorneys text line. Up first is one of our favorites, Lori from Phoenix. First of all, Lori, with a good summation of what the Niners have done in the first 2 rounds. Getting some help for your all-pro edge rusher and your all-pro linebacker is a recipe for success. Now go get an O-lineman. That's from Lori in Phoenix. Sterling, do you agree? Should this Niner pick, or should they at least very heavily consider going offensive line here with the pick 75th overall coming up?
There's one player I think could fit them. Obviously, there's more than one, but I think if you're eyeing a player at 75, my eyes are going to be on Charles Grant of William and Mary. So, Lori, if you're one of those people who want an offensive lineman that can play tackle, can play guard in that wide zone scheme, may need some time to grow, but I think you hope in 2026 can be your right tackle. And if all things go well, maybe when Trent retires, he has the potential to be a left tackle of the future. So, there is some growth that should be had there, but I do think at some point, whether it is 75 or 100, San Francisco has to find some help to protect their quarterback. You want to talk about trenches. You've gone defense twice. Don't neglect protecting who you want to be your franchise quarterback of the future, who already has 3 injuries under his belt through 3 years of playing so far. So I get it, I understand it, and I wouldn't be shocked to see it because San Francisco, I do think they have some questions there, almost everywhere but right guard and left tackle. So, Lori, I'm with you here, and I kind of want to see it at pick 75. Get a guy you like, get ahead of the curve, and take one of the best tackles on the board still remaining, because this tackle class is really thin. If you can get your guy, maybe it's Marcus Bowe from Purdue, but one of those 2 guys make a lot of sense for San Francisco.
How do you try to evaluate an offensive lineman, or I guess really anybody, but I feel like offensive line and defensive line are some of the more difficult ones to evaluate when you are coming from a small school like William and Mary? I know, like,
it's hard.
You know, the Niners obviously drafted Trey Lance from North Dakota State, and they obviously play like higher quality opponents than William and Mary. But it kind of feels like he dominated, I'm sure, every game that he played because he was at William and Mary. He's going to be a 3rd-round draft pick in all likelihood in the 2025 NFL draft. He's clearly a quality football player, but it kind of feels like you're taking a chance because I don't know, in my mind, Sterling, as I try to watch some tape and see, how does this guy stack up? And you try to differentiate between a couple of guys here and there. You threw out a couple of other offensive tackle names. It feels pretty tough, and it's kind of hard to get past the initial, well, he went to William and Mary. Of course he's going to look good. Like, how is he going to look when he gets to the NFL and he's going up against not necessarily like all pros left and right, but dudes that dominated at the collegiate level in the SEC and the Big Ten? This guy's out of William and Mary.
Everything you just said is absolutely correct. How do you project? How do you predict what they can be at the NFL level? And I think for a player like Charles Grant, sitting for a year does him wonders. I think San Francisco has never minded sitting a player for a year. Nick Zakelj, who obviously hasn't been a great player for them, he sat for about 2 or 3 years.
Aaron Banks
scouted him for about 6 years. Exactly. Aaron Banks, who couldn't translate to right guard with Laken Tomlinson there, sat for a year. As a 2nd-round pick, they sat him. So If San Francisco views this as we see a star potential in Charles Grant, who's from a small school, William and Mary, and they believe they can sit him for a year behind Colton McKivitz, behind Trent Williams, you can see it happen. Or they can go with Dominic Pooty's former teammate Logan Brown from Kansas and get you some star power out there at the tackle position. So there's ways to go, but you're absolutely right, Mark. San Francisco taking a small town, small school tackle may be a massive risk. I wouldn't put it past them, though. They don't mind letting guys sit for a year or two if it means getting the best of them in year 2 or 3.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind that either. I just wish they would have done something like that last year or maybe 2 years ago so that the guy would be ready to play now. But now you're in a spot where maybe you draft this guy and, hey, he could be good in a year, could be good in a couple of years, but you might need help on that offensive line right now. One more pick to clean up. The New England Patriots, 69 overall, the 5th pick in the 3rd round. They go Kyle Williams, a wide receiver. No, not that Kyle Williams. He's not draft eligible, but Kyle Williams, a wide receiver out of Washington State, goes to the New England Patriots. Of course, we all have very terrible memories when we hear the name Kyle Williams. Not that one, but he's the latest.
Yeah, Lawrence Tynes haunts me.
Yeah, Lawrence Tynes. Oh, God, that entire NFC Championship game against the Giants. Oh, God, wish I could just wipe that from my entire...
Thank you, Cam.
Yes, thank you, Cam. That was very perfect timing on that one. But Kyle Williams, wide receiver, Washington State is the pick for the New England Patriots. The Niners are just a couple of picks away as we gear up for them there. So, okay, offensive tackle is on the board. It is a possibility for the 49ers here at maybe not necessarily 75th, but at some point here in the 3rd round, we shall see it. They might go offensive line in the 75th pick. Maybe they do it 100th overall. We shall see. One other question from the Boxer and Gerson Work Injury Attorneys text line, and certainly I'm going to have to lean on you for this one because I know you know all of these guys. The 415 asks, would love to get Xavier Watts to replace Hufanga at safety. What are your thoughts? Xavier Watts, the Notre Dame safety, 6 foot, 204 pounds. A lot of people have him as a top 5 safety. There's only been, a couple of safeties off the board so far in the draft. There have been 3 safeties picked. 1 in the 1st round, 2 in the 2nd round, none so far here in the 3rd round. The 415 Sterling would love your thoughts on Xavier Watts because the Niners, they might be looking at needing another starting safety pretty darn soon. Of course, we know Hufanga is gone. Depends how you feel about Jair Brown, a draft pick a couple of years ago out of Penn State, has played a lot so far in his first 2 years, but last year felt like this most recent season kind of took a bit of a step back or at least did not progress the way a lot of us were expecting. You love what you saw from Malik Mustafa, the rookie, this past season. But you're going to need a second safety unless you still believe in Jair Brown. Do you think the Niners are considering using a pick this early on a safety, Sterling? And what do you think about Xavier Watts specifically?
It's tough because San Francisco also brought in Jason Pinnock from the Giants, who has incredible ball skills. He'll probably be that bigger slot corner, maybe play in the box for them as a safety. They brought in Richie Grant. They have George Odom. So as of now, they have 5 safeties on the roster. Jalen Mahoney's still there. They have 6 guys that all played last year. Most of those guys are special teams players, so there is that aspect to look at. But that said, you have a new defensive coordinator in there, and you don't know if they like Jair Brown at all. And I think they tried to keep a lot of the archetypes in place once Saleh left, and they tried, and I think Jair Brown could still be a good player for you, but I will plant my flag on the truth that this team desperately misses Jimmy Ward, a roaming free safety who may not get you picks, but is tremendous in coverage. And although Xavier Watts certainly has more flexibility, he does give you a lot of what Jimmy Ward possessed as that free safety, nickel cornerback, and also play in the slot. The notes I have here, he's 6 foot, 203 pounds, 82 tackles last year, 23 run defensive stops. That means plays of negative yards or 0 yards, so pretty good for a safety. 7 pressures, 6 interceptions, 13 picks the last 2 seasons, so incredible ball skills. May have some of the best ball skills in the entire draft. And look, it's a player that I think Saleh can use as this kind of Swiss Army knife for the defense. And I think for a playmaker on defense on the back end, it could be a good pick for them. I just don't know with the room they currently have, do you have room for a seventh safety on the roster that Saleh may come in here and say, I like Jair Brown, so it might be a luxury pick, but if you get a player that can get you the ball back, it's never bad to have those guys on your defense.
Yeah, no doubt. I think I'm with you overall, though, and part of it is because of who is currently in the safety room, and we do appreciate the text from the 415 again on the Boxer and Gerson work injury attorneys text line. Keep them coming as the Niners are approaching being on the clock. Saints are on the clock right now, then the Bills, then the Jets, and then the Broncos, and then the 49ers with the 75th overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. We will let you know exactly who it is whenever that time comes. The current safety group is part of the reason, and you mentioned it, as maybe a luxury pick. Like, you have a guy you really like. Maybe you didn't think it's the biggest spot of need, but you can't quite pass him up. I don't know if the 49ers, Sterling, are in a position to be able to make a luxury pick right now. I get the idea of, like, no matter what, best player available, right? BPA, best player available. Just do that over and over and over again. You're going to hit on a bunch of them, and you're going to have a really good team because you have a lot of really good players. I understand that. But considering the holes the 49ers have, Sterling, I don't think the 49ers can just say, well, this safety or any other position is the highest rated guy that we have left on our board, but that isn't really necessarily a spot that we need. And we still need help on the offensive line. I know we've already picked 2 defensive linemen, one on the outside, one on the inside, but we still need more help there. You need another linebacker. Like, there's still so many other holes on this team right now. They're going to pick a running back at some point. They probably are going to pick a wide receiver at some point. Like, we will see, but I just don't know if we're at a point where the 49ers can use a pick this early in the draft still, where, by the way, they've had a ton of success in the third round, I don't know if the safety position is one that is that big of a need that they're going to look to address that yet so far here in the third round.
Yeah, I kind of view safety as the linebacker position, although you need a linebacker anyways. I don't know if you need one guy in the third round. I mentioned Chris Paul Jr. last night. I can see him going here in round 3 from Ole Miss. But that said, though, you have a guy in D. Winters you like. You have a guy in Jair Brown you like enough. Now, is that enough to move off those players if somebody you like's on the board? Maybe. But I think you're right, Mark. The Niners have too many needs at too many positions, mainly on the defensive line. Maybe a cornerback, but even then, even cornerback, like secondary feels like it's kind of done to me. You brought in Trey Brown, who's had an up and down career with Seattle, but is kind of going to be that cornerback 3. You have Darrell Luter Jr., who they're still high on here. I think you're eyeing a cornerback probably in round 5, Kobe Bryant from Kansas. Maybe you get overzealous and get Jacob Parrish from Kansas State. But I think you're right. Offensive line, defensive line, this team needs so much work on the trenches as you watch Vernon Broughton go to the Saints, and Landon Jackson now goes to the Bills from Arkansas. So 2 big hitters off the board for you on the defensive line. San Francisco may sit back and say, hey, let's not miss the next one at 75 and just 2 picks. So every pick I get nervous, Mark, of like, what are they going to do? Don't mess this up, please. And so I'm going to be sitting here on the edge of my seat saying, don't mess this up. Don't mess this up. Don't mess this up when San Francisco's pick comes in at 75.
You think they're looking at this run on a couple of defensive linemen just recently, and you're thinking they got to swoop in and take another? You think that's on their mind here?
Well, my concern is both of the defensive linemen they took, albeit good players, are run defenders primarily. You got to get an interior pass rusher. Vernon Broughton just went. Omar Norman Lott went to Kansas City. So there are less prospects on that board you like. Maybe you go Jordan Birch from Oregon, who is kind of the tweener guy, can play inside outside. Go Ducks. Maybe you talk about Aeneas Peebles, Virginia Tech, is that pass rusher. A Joshua Farmer. So there is some players there, but the longer you wait, the less players you have to choose from, and you've seen 2 big ones off the board here in the last 2 picks. So for San Francisco, do you want the draft to dictate what you do, or do you want to dictate the draft? And so far, I think they've gotten the two players they've loved in round 1s and 2, but round 3, this is where the good players dwindle down to the okay, the rotational guys, and you don't want to miss on one of those last good day 1 starters here at pick 75.
Yeah, and the run on defensive tackles or defensive linemen has ended, at least for the moment. The Jets pick a corner out of Florida State. I don't know if you know how to pronounce the first name. Thomas is the last name.
That is Azarie Thomas from Florida State.
Okay.
Yes.
Azarie Thomas, corner out of Florida State, is the pick to the New York Jets, 73 overall. So it's just the Denver Broncos who are on the clock now, and then the San Francisco 49ers. So offensive line is a possibility. Defensive line, specifically maybe edge rusher, a possibility, or maybe a guy in the interior that you view a little bit more as a pass rusher. We've got a couple of texts that are looking at, safety or somewhere else, linebacker potentially. I would guess, Sterling, that is going to be either offensive line or defensive line. It's going to be one of those two spots. I think you're spot on as well. Maybe the 49ers are going to triple down on the D-line in their first 3 picks. If it's not D-line, I think it's got to be offensive line. I think the 49ers are just going to be dead set on making 8 of their 11 picks this draft in the trenches on either side of the football. It's feeling like it's headed that direction.
Well, we have a tweet from Niners CEO Jed York.
Another one. He's been tweeting all day.
He has been busy on the X and Twitter throughout the draft, and before every selection, he puts one out, and this one says, "Let's put this pick in, #conviction." That to me says trenches again. Go defensive line. We got to get some dogs on the interior. So I'm hoping I'm reading Jed's tweet correctly, because there's a need there, and it feels like they want to give Saleh every single pick he possibly can have in this year's draft.
Well, okay, so it's interesting because 2 hours ago, before the 49ers made their pick in the second round, he tweeted so many choices. Wonder what we are going to do here, #trenches. Then the tweet that you just mentioned, let's put this pick in, not #trenches, but #conviction. And then just a few seconds after that one, he tweeted, big hitter welcome. So that, you're right, this feels like it's going to be a defensive lineman again, Sterling.
But then I'm like, Chris Paul Jr., linebacker, comes down out of the box. He's a heavy hitter.
Or maybe a safety coming down.
Replacement. Jed, you got me hyped. What are you doing, brother?
What are they going to do? We got a couple of picks until the 49ers make their selection. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we will have the 49ers pick here in the third round. We're looking forward to it. The Niners are not on the clock just yet. It is currently the Denver Broncos. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll find out who the Niners are picking in the third round. Time for a break. It's Sterling and Grandi with you. Draft night continues. Draft night 2 continues. We're back with more next right here on 95.7 The Game.
Now back to Draft Night on 95.7 The Game.
Welcome back. Draft night continues here on 95.7 The Game, and the 49ers. I'll talk about great timing. It's Sterling Bennett and Marc Grandi with you. The 49ers are about to make their 75th overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, their third selection so far this year. They've gone Mykel Williams, edge rusher, Alfred Collins, defensive tackle, and now for their third pick, let's find out. Let's go to Green Bay.
How's it going? 25 years since I've been here. Let's go Bay Area. With the 75th pick in the 2025 draft, San Francisco 49ers select Nick Martin, Oklahoma State, linebacker.
Wow, there it is. Okay, that's Julian Peterson, first of all, announcing the pick. And the pick is Nick Martin, linebacker out of Oklahoma State, 6 feet tall, 221 pounds, 4 years in college. One was a redshirt, so he's a junior, 22 years old. He'll be 23 in the season. A 2-year starter, Sterling at Oklahoma State, his most recent year. Cut short due to injury, but he had himself a hell of a second season as a sophomore. 140 tackles, or one of 6 FBS players with more than 140 tackles in 2023. He was on pace to do something similar this year before an knee injury ended his season and cut it short. But not defensive line, not offensive line. It's a linebacker, Sterling. Nick Martin out of Oklahoma State.
I am perplexed. I really am. Not because I don't like Nicholas Martin. I think he's a really good player, at least he can be. I don't mind the injury history there. Again, you missed almost your entire season last year due to an injury, but overall, the value, the player you could have grabbed, Nicholas Martin's probably going to be there at pick 100. Now, maybe they have insight we don't know about, which is most likely in this case. I think there's better value at linebacker. Chris Paul Jr., Jeffrey Bass, I know you know him pretty well.
Yeah.
But Nicholas Martin also could be one of those players where, because he got hurt, San Francisco saw the value and said, hey, there's a guy that plays really quick, really fast. He wants to tackle. He gives you 110%, has a top-tier work ethic. The production was there pre-injury. Just reading you the discrepancy of 2024 compared to 2023. 49 tackles last year, 25 defensive run stops. Again, that's negative yards and 0 yards gained on the ground, 9 pressures, 1 forced fumble, and 1 pass deflection. Go to 2023, you already read the tackles off for us, 140, 124, whatever it was.
140.
60 defensive run stops. Like, you almost tripling your negative plays gained for your defense, 30 pressures, 6 sacks. He has that speed that you like to go from one sideline to the other. So there's a lot to like from an athletic standpoint, with San Francisco needs those guys in the rooms. However, on day one, is he better than D. Winters? Because he has shorter arms. He's not going to clog passing lanes. I think they just like the athletic upside because as a coverage player, he leaves a little bit desired. But overall, a good run defender, plays quick, good work ethic. Also a team captain in Oklahoma State. So there is a lot to like from him, but I'm not going to lie to you, Mark. This may have been, unless Martin becomes a great player, which he rightfully could, this may be their 3rd-round running back, but instead it's a linebacker this year.
We have our first pick of the year where Sterling is not happy about it. Let me read the blurb from Dane Brugler, the beast of The Athletic, on the newest 49er linebacker, Nick Martin out of Oklahoma State. Built, and this is a quote, built more like a muscular safety, Martin is an easy mover with a straight line burst and true sideline to sideline range to be a run and chase backer. He's an aggressive striker, and his tackle production speaks for itself, but his average length and point of attack strength will hurt his ability to sift through NFL traffic and disengage from pro blockers Overall, Martin doesn't have the size that most teams desire at the position, but his urgent athleticism will give him a chance to earn a role as a will linebacker. He should find regular work as a core special teamer and be the first man off the bench on defense. That is the quick summation from Dane Brugler of The Athletic on the newest Niner linebacker, Nick Martin. Wow. What is interesting, Sterling, is you mentioned leave something to be desired in terms of coverage. He is built, again, as Dane Brugler said, a little bit more like a muscular safety, and the 49ers do tend to like safety-like traits in their linebackers. Maybe not necessarily, I mean, a big part of it is the speed and the agility. Generally, they like it because they like their linebackers to be able to cover wide receivers and running backs and tight ends that are out there running routes. Maybe he has some of the physical tools to become that, but he hasn't quite shown the ability to cover guys yet at the collegiate level. Been more so just a tackler and a run stopper, but it does feel like he has perhaps some of the athleticism and the ability to perhaps develop that at the pro level.
Well, let's not forget that Fred Warner was also playing a little bit of safety at BYU.
Yeah.
I'm not comparing Nicholas Martin to Fred Warner, who is the best linebacker in football, but if it works out, awesome, great. You needed a linebacker. I wouldn't have minded it here. However, with the players on the board and the value, this feels like whether it was, whatever assistant coach it was like, I got to get my guy here. This is my guy here. And they said, okay, we'll do it. And it's not a head-scratching call based on the player, but it's at the pick it was, 75. And again, he'll get into camp and he may shock us all, and we'll say, good, I love being wrong here, especially myself. But I think Nicholas Martin would have been there in round 4. Again, maybe I'm wrong and I'm okay with that, but just what you need offensive line-wise, defensive line-wise, there's better cornerbacks. Heck, I would have rather you taken a running back here.
Wow.
Caleb Johnson,
Really?
DJ Giddens over Nicholas Martin. But again, they like the athletic traits, the work ethic, the speed. There's a chance it pays off, but I will tell you this is certainly a gamble for them at pick 75 with Nicholas Martin, linebacker out of Oklahoma State.
Yeah, I'm not just saying this because of the sweatshirt that I've got on right now. If you're watching on Twitch or YouTube, there was just another pick that came in. The Arizona Cardinals, I'm only bringing it up because it is an NFC West team. The Arizona Cardinals go Jordan Birch, edge rusher. He can also play inside out of Oregon. Huge fan of Jordan Birch. And I don't know, Sterling, maybe it's just me. We're going to get back to the Niners in a second, but I feel like the Cardinals are having themselves a pretty darn good draft right now. They just go and get Jordan Birch. They did, in the second round, they got one of the best cornerbacks in the draft, Will Johnson out of Michigan, who fell an incredible amount because of concerns with a knee injury. What did they do in the first round? They had in the first round Walter Nolan, defensive tackle out of Ole Miss. I know you were very frustrated, ended up with the Arizona Cardinals. Now they tack on Jordan Birch, a defensive lineman. They go 3 defensive players, Walter Nolan, Will Johnson, and Jordan Birch. I don't know. I mean, you agree? Pretty good draft so far for the Cardinals, Sterling?
The Cardinals are having the bizarro version of the San Francisco 49ers mock draft we all thought it was going to be. Will Johnson, yes, was a player I figured would go to the Cardinals in the first round, but you have to think about they're trying to translate what they did in Philadelphia with Jonathan Gannon over to what they do in Arizona, yeah. And you now have your Carter with Walter Nolan. You have Will Johnson, who becomes your Darius Slay. Like, they're trying to emulate what happened in Philadelphia and Arizona, and they're risky. Walter Nolan has some immaturity issues. I think could still be a great player. Will Johnson has a knee injury that he says he's healthy, but it tanked his draft stock, also has some long speed concerns. But I think if those guys hit, the Cardinals have 2 first-round draft picks through rounds 1 and 2.
Yeah, we'll go back to the Niners here in just a sec. The latest pick, though, this is kind of funny. The Texans just made their pick, 79th overall, getting towards the middle of the 3rd round. They go another Iowa State wide receiver. Their pick in the 2nd round was Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State, a wide receiver. Now they get Jalen Noel, a wide receiver out of Iowa State. So a couple of Iowa State wide receivers for the Houston Texans here today. They also had a pick of an offensive lineman in the second round as well.
Should I say his name for you, Mark?
Ariante Ursary?
You got it?
Is that correct?
You got it.
I got it.
Ariante Ursary, you got it.
There we go, out of Minnesota. So those are the 3 picks for the Houston Texans so far today, including 2 highly drafted Iowa State wide receivers. Okay, so the 49ers, their 3rd pick overall, second today, is Nick Martin, linebacker out of Oklahoma State. Their 3 picks now, all told, are Michael Williams, edge rusher, defensive end out of Georgia, Alfred Collins, defensive tackle out of Texas, and now Nick Martin, a linebacker out of Oklahoma State. This is the first that is at least somewhat surprising, and is probably surprising on 2 fronts, Sterling. One, it's the position, not that linebacker was not a spot of need, because of course it was, but there were other spots where you felt like were probably more of a position of need. But it's also a bit surprising because if you would have told me they were taking a linebacker, I think most of us would have expected Chris Paul Jr., nicknamed Pooh, who I know you had been talking about often. And just before this pick was announced, you were thinking maybe it was Chris Paul Jr. The tweet by CEO Jed York about heavy hitters made you think immediately about Chris Paul Jr., linebacker out of Ole Miss. So it's a little surprising, Sterling, because 1, it was a linebacker, and 2, the linebacker was not Chris Paul Jr.
Well, it's funny, too, because both Chris Paul Jr. and Nicholas Martin lack the length you like to clog the passing lanes, to bat down passes over the middle. So there is some similarities there, but you're talking about an injury concern maybe with Nicholas Martin, who's probably healthy now. You're talking about a player that Chris Paul Jr. had a 7.6 missed tackle rate. Pretty good as a linebacker at the NFL level, which I think one of the most underrated things San Francisco needs to get better at is just tackling the opposing team.
Yeah.
They miss so many tackles, and having a player like Chris Paul Jr., which having short arms doesn't help your ability to tackle, but a 7.6% missed tackle rate is a pretty good rate at the collegiate level. And Chris Paul is really good in coverage, so I think San Francisco is banking on Nicholas Martin's kind of hybrid safety build to be what carries him into being a good coverage player. Or they think D. Winters can be that for them instead, and they value D. Winters as the number 2 linebacker on that defense, which then flips things back around and says, then why are you taking a linebacker that may not even start for you on day 1 at pick 75? That's the confusing part. Even Dane Brugler said he's probably not going to start for you. The first guy off the bench was the exact quote. That guy goes at 75. Again, he could be good. He could be awesome, but it's a pick that's going to have to take some time. And I'd rather have a guy that can plug in day 1. Dylan Fairchild just goes to the Bengals here. He can run the wide zone system. You have to have a left guard. Why wasn't he the pick for those that wanted an offensive lineman? So this is one of those of their first 3 picks that has to be justified to me in a certain way. But again, maybe things come to fruition and pan out for him. But on the board, I'd rather have Dylan Fairchild than Nicholas Martin currently, who goes about 6 picks later.
Yeah, Dylan Fairchild, guard out of Georgia, just got picked by the Cincinnati Bengals. He's the pick at 81 overall. The 49ers picked Nick Martin, linebacker out of Oklahoma State, 75th overall. For what it's worth, and everybody has different grades. For all we know, the 49ers might have had a first-round grade on Nick Martin. Probably not, but who the hell knows? And there's a lot of variation in how a number of different people in the media rate and rank these prospects, including you, who I know do very extensive research on this, Sterling. I go off of, not that I trust every word that he says, just a very informational piece of work, The Beast by Dane Brugler on The Athletic. Just one man's opinion, Sterling. Dane Brugler has a 5th-round grade on Nick Martin. Now, being involved in the Niners draft process, or at least having covered it for a while now, you and I both know, Sterling, the Niners do not care what other people think. The Niners have this guy much higher rated than almost anybody else, would be my guess. Where I get a little bit frustrated isn't necessarily like I don't trust that he's a quality player. I just feel pretty darn confident that he probably would have been available to you 30 picks later, 25 picks later at 100 overall. And you could have used this opportunity to get somebody else of value, even if you felt like you wanted Nick Martin over the guy that you pick instead of him. maybe it's not worth the risk if you're so in love with this guy. And if you're so in love with him, then you know what? I'll give you a pass. But you better be right, because you had potentially missed the opportunity to still get this guy and double up on somebody else who maybe you don't absolutely love, but that you feel really confident you would love at 100 and isn't going to be there at 100 most likely.
And that's the frustrating part, because a lot of the NFL draft is, okay, you got a guy, but who's still on the board?
Yeah.
And it comes about value and positional value. You know, there's a reason why we talked about Shadur Sanders. This quarterback class is not good, and you want guys and will take risks on guys that have the higher upside. There's a reason why you're watching him fall. There's a reason as to why Dan Brugler, and I'm sure a lot more pundits out there and scouts, had Nicholas Martin lower. It just seems like San Francisco likes to zig when other teams zag. They do things their own way. But I guarantee you this, Mark, somebody in that building had to have loved Nicholas Martin. Now, in one case, that's a really good thing that they, went on their soapbox and said, hey, Kyle, hey, John, hey, Robert Saleh, I want that guy in the room. But the other stance could be that scout could get fired tomorrow if things don't go well for Nicholas Martin. It's a risk. I think you can put it in the reach category for sure. I'd rather have Jacob Parrish, DJ Giddens, Caleb Johnson, a lot more players, Dylan Fairchild, but it all comes down to who they like. And maybe they make up for it at pick 100 and we all say whatever when it's all said and done. But I just think you got to hit on picks, and this is a reach for them at pick 75. And it's one that you may look back like Trey Sermon, like Ty Davis Price, and you say, what were they thinking? But also, he could pan out, and we all say, whoever was thinking that was doing a really good job out there. Man, what a great job by the Niners. But it's a risk. It's a really big risk. I hope it works out. But with the board as it stands, Niner fans can start to get a little, you nailed the first two, but number 3 has you feeling, why do they always do this in the third round every year? I'm getting shades of those third-round running backs again with the Nicholas Martin pick.
It's funny because I threw out the Niners have had success in the third round. They've had recent success and then success a long time ago. They picked Dominic Pooney in the third round last year. Absolute home run of a pick in the third round. He started all 17 games. He was amazing as a rookie. Did better than any of us could have expected. And frankly, for me, Sterling, right guard, because it's Dominic Pooney, that's the only position I don't feel like the Niners have to address on the offensive line this offseason. I know full well that they're not going to address all 4 of the other positions. They might only address 1 or 2. We will see what the rest of the draft holds. But successful third-round pick last year. Then you got to go all the way back to 2018, the last time you felt like they had a real success in the third round, because that was when they drafted Fred Warner out of BYU. And at that point, didn't really know a lot about Fred Warner. You mentioned he played some safety at BYU, and now he's turned in to All-Pro Fred and arguably the best linebacker in the NFL. But since Fred Warner and before Dominic Pooney last year, you have Jalen Hurd in 2019. Never played a regular season game for you or for anybody else in the NFL.
Preseason warrior.
I mean, he was the preseason MVP. My God, that dude would catch like 4 touchdowns a game in the preseason, it would feel like.
Didn't Peter King call him the potential rookie of the year because he was so good in the preseason?
He might have.
Peter, I love you, but what were you watching out there?
So Jalen Hurd in 2019. They did not have a third-round pick in 2020. In 2021, one of those third-round running backs you're talking about, Trey Sermon. They also picked Ambry Thomas. Ambry Thomas had a nice moment, at least, with the 49ers, had an interception in a really important game against the Rams to get the Niners to the postseason. But other than that, didn't really do.
Then got burned in that playoff game.
Then got burned in that playoff game, yes. But Trey Sermon and Ambry Thomas in the third round in 2021. Overall, those are, one major thumb down for Trey Sermon, and then, another thumb down for Ambry Thomas. In the third round in 2022, Ty Davis Price, a running back, and Danny Gray, a wide receiver. Both of those major thumbs down. Absolutely did nothing for you in the regular season. Third round 2 years ago, 2023. This might be the worst of them all, considering, and it's pretty amazing considering what some of the others have been. Jake Moody, a kicker, and Cameron Latu, a tight end. Cameron Latu has not seen the field in a regular season game yet. He's been a pro for 2 years, and Jake Moody has been so bad through 2 years that most Niner fans want a replacement kicker. Doesn't seem like that's going to happen this offseason either. And then we get into last year's draft with Dominic Pooney. So it's really kind of just been boom or bust. Either you make an amazing pick, Sterling, in the third round, or the third round literally could not have gone any worse.
Yeah, it's... the Niners always do this, and you want to hold judgment because none of these players are finished products. You're all projecting, you're all trying to figure out what they can be in 2 to 3 years' time. But when you are the San Francisco 49ers, and seemingly you view this as a retooling year, which maybe this is one of their retooling picks, and okay, you can get behind that if it works out for you. But in that third round, it seems to be a blind spot for them, and you're hoping it's not the case. Obviously, Fred Warner, a third-round pick. We already covered him plenty of times, but you just watched Caleb Johnson go, running back. You just watched Jacob Parrish go to the Buccaneers. It's like, hey, there were better picks on that board at the time, at least on day one, where does San Francisco really want to win now, or is this a stash pick for a year, which I don't think many fans can get behind the idea of stashing a player for a year when you have an older Trent Williams. Brock Purdy you're going to pay big money to. You're going to redo George Kittle's deal. You have an aging Fred Warner who's still playing great football, but he's inching closer to 30 years old. The time to win is now, and you want to reopen that window. Nicholas Martin in year one probably doesn't do enough to open the window up for you at all. So, again, it's a perplexing pick. It may work out in the future, but day one, it's really hard to see the vision they're going for with the Nicholas Martin pick at 75 overall.
What I will say as we just zoom out a little bit here, 3 picks in, Mykel Williams, edge rusher out of Georgia, Alfred Collins, defensive tackle, big body you throw in the middle of your defensive line, D-tackle out of Texas, and now Nick Martin, linebacker out of Oklahoma State. 3 picks in. We can have our qualms with Nick Martin, and we have had him for over 20 minutes now, and I think everything that we've said is fair. 3 picks in, though, Sterling. The overall, as we zoom out and look at the draft as a whole so far, and they still have 8 picks to make currently scheduled. They're going to make, I would expect, 1 more tonight. They have the 100th pick in the NFL draft, a special compensatory pick tacked on to the very end of this third round. We'll see if they end up making that pick. If they trade up, trade out, we shall see. They are scheduled to make 1 more pick. But through 3 picks, Sterling, as we just look at the overall theme of the draft, I am not upset at all that the 3 picks are all on the defense. I am not upset at that. I would not have minded the first 2 picks being defenders, as we saw with Mykel Williams and Alfred Collins on the D-line, and then you go offensive line here in the third round. But considering that the Niners' strength has always, when they've been successful, their strength has always been the defense. They have always been a team that relies on their defense. They've always been the team where you feel like, all right, backs against the wall. Would you rather have a one-possession lead and your defense on the field, or a one-possession deficit and your offense on the field? They have always felt like when they've been their best, you'd rather have your defense on the field. I do not mind that we see this 49er team getting back to that, because there's no doubt the defense last year was, in my mind, reason number 1 why they did not even make the postseason, won just 6 games, lost 11, and had one of the more disappointing seasons in recent memory coming off of a Super Bowl appearance. So we can be upset about the player, and maybe there was better value. Maybe you could have got him later. But the overall process, Sterling, the overall thought, I definitely do not mind 3 defensive players, the first 3 picks for the Niners.
And we've talked about it plenty of times last night on day one, and certainly today. The defense is the lifeblood of what San Francisco wants to do. It was their identity under Robert Saleh and DeMeco Ryans, and somewhat of Steve Wilkes, albeit there was some bumps throughout that path that was traveled. And Nick Sorensen, it was like, what the heck's going on every single Sunday? And if they want to steer that boat back in the right direction, they're going to let Saleh get his guys. And if, there is something to be said of, do you trust Robert Saleh to make the right pick here? And I think overwhelmingly we all do. And so you'll hold judgment but from the onset or from the outside looking in, you start to question things. But Sulla has an eye for talent. Jamian Sherwood, a 5th-round pick, got paid this past offseason. Fred Warner, a 3rd-round pick. So if he likes a linebacker, usually it's a pretty good risk. Dre Greenlaw, a 5th-round pick. But funny enough, most of those guys aren't 3rd-rounders, which is what this was here today.
Yeah, the Niners do have another 3rd-round pick coming up, and they've got 8 more picks in total in this 2025 NFL draft. They could be making some moves, some trades. We shall see. Whatever the Niners do the rest of today, we will keep you updated. There's at least going to be some action, whether it is a trade or a pick or both. Multiple picks, we shall see. We'll let you know, of course, right here on 95.7 The Game as draft night continues. That's Sterling Bennett. I'm Marc Grandi. Time for a break. When we come back, we'll continue to update you on the 3rd-round picks. We're more than halfway through the 3rd round now. The Niners are inching back towards being on the clock. What should they do with their 4th overall pick in this year's draft? We'll talk about that and a whole lot more. And plus, always open for your comments, your questions, your phone calls, your texts, your comments on YouTube as well. 888-957-9570 and youtube.com/957 The Game. Sterling and Grandi back with more next on Draft Night 2 right here on 95.7 The Game.
Francisco 49ers select Nick Martin, Oklahoma State, linebacker.
Now back to Draft Night on 95.7 The Game.
That was Julian Peterson, former Niner, announcing the Niners' day 2 picks. He announced earlier today Alfred Collins, defensive tackle out of Texas, and then just about a half hour ago, he announced the 49ers' first pick in the 3rd round tonight, Nick Martin, linebacker out of Oklahoma State. The general consensus as we welcome you back to Draft Night here on 95.7 The Game. It's day 2 of the NFL Draft. Sterling, Bennett, Marc, Grandi with you. The general consensus is a bit of a reach, but this is new or not new for the 49ers, Sterling. We thought the same exact thing when the Niners went with Ricky Pearsall near the very end of the 1st round last year, just about a year ago exactly. And while, of course, he had a wild rookie year and due to nothing that he did wrong, off the field stuff, of course, got shot in an entirely just random experience here in San Francisco. Recovered pretty darn quickly, got on the field and had some moments, flashed here and there, then was really good towards the tail end of the season. Looked like he proved why the Niners picked him in the 1st round. But when he was picked, Sterling, you and I were sitting here in the studio and we were thinking, what the hell are they doing? They could have maybe gotten him in the 2nd round. There are other spots that they need players in more than wide receiver. Why did they do this? But we feel a lot better about Ricky Pearsall now after what happened in the wide receiver room around him and what we saw him do. So I get the thought about Nick Martin. Seems like a reach. You could have gotten him later, whatever. All it was going to take, Sterling, is Nick Martin, not necessarily like in training camp, although that will begin to assuage maybe some fears, but he comes out and performs as a rookie. No one is ever going to remember how they felt on draft day when it looked like, oh, that was a reach. Now it just comes down to, are the Niners right or are the Niners wrong? Because you can be wrong on a pick. It happens all the time. It's going to happen to at least a couple of the Niners picks in this draft. It's just the way that the NFL draft works. But when you do make a pick like this, where the general consensus is you could have gotten them a lot later, the pressure to get that one right just kind of ratchets up a little bit more. It's very similar to you better get a kicker right when you pick him in the 3rd round, when you trade up to pick him in the 3rd round. And I threw Jake Moody under the bus a little bit last segment in the 510 on the Boxer and Gerson Work Injury Attorneys text line, wants to make sure I give him his due credit. The 510 saying Jake Moody was not bad for 2 years. He was bad last year after an injury and was better in 2023. Okay, maybe that's somewhat fair. The reality is probably somewhere in the middle.
Semantics.
He wasn't very good last year, and I don't know, considering where he was drafted, you would hope he would be a whole lot better. The Niners are inviting a little bit of pressure with this pick, Sterling, but all it is going to take for all of us to forget about this and never think about him being a reach again is he just comes out and plays good football.
And I think it's smart to classify what a reach means, right? A reach usually is based on the consensus boards, where most scouts have them, where most teams have them, which we are not privy to what teams' draft boards look like, nor should we really be. But when it seems like most scouts in the country, most pundits, most media members have a guy on day 3, a UDFA or whatever, and you take him on round 3, it does raise some red flags. Now, I'm sure had Nicholas Martin played most of the season, you probably would have saw a better player. This wouldn't be that big of a question, but again, this is one of those picks where, you're right, Marc, they're inviting criticism of maybe you could have gotten this guy later. And it's very different to me from the Pearsall pick because you like the talent of Pearsall. You saw the vision of Pearsall.
Yeah.
He can play inside, he can play outside, he can separate really well. You trade Debo away, and you have Ayuk, and you have Pearsall, and you feel pretty good about yourself. And would like to think that had Brandon Ayuk not gotten hurt, and you walk into a season with a healthy Ayuk and a healthy Pearsall, you feel pretty good about your wide receiver room with Jawan Jennings and Marcus Robinson. But we also saw in last year's draft, Ladd McConkey goes immediately after.
Yeah.
Xavier Legette goes immediately after. we may not see a linebacker taken in the next round and a half. And it's like, that's interesting. That's different. That's weird. So you can justify Pearsall's pick in that way. But if most fans don't see a linebacker taken in the next 10 picks, you're going to start to question yourself, okay, had you picked the guy at 100, would it have been that big of a difference? And could you have netted that top running back or a top cornerback or a top tackle for you to help your offensive line? Again, it's all about preferences and what each person and player and scout wants. But again, does it make you feel better knowing that somebody in that room really loved Nicholas Martin? Because somebody obviously did. And if it's Robert Saleh, a lot of fans trust him to find the right players. And who am I to question that of Bobby Saleh out there in San Francisco, all jacked up? He's going to scare me to death on the sideline again this year. So it could be a great pick, but there's a lot of doubt in my mind at pick 75.
Yeah, we're currently sitting at the Rams on the clock at pick 90 overall right now.
Shadur Sanders.
Could you imagine?
Shadur Sanders.
I mean, he's still not been picked. He's still out there sitting in wherever the hell he's sitting with all those cameras on. They haven't really cut away to him on the broadcast much yet today after they did that.
They did it like 90 times last
God.
night. You can't do it again today.
They did it for every single pick, just about. They would flash a Shadur Sanders at some point. We haven't seen a lot of him yet. There's only been, one quarterback today? It's just been Tyler Shuck early in the second round. He went to the New Orleans Saints kind of as a surprising pick. Third quarterback off the board after two quarterbacks in the first round yesterday. Just those three quarterbacks. That maybe is one of my biggest surprises of the draft so far, Sterling, and we'll get back to the 49ers specifically in a second. I know I mentioned this to you and Evans yesterday. One of my bigger surprises is simply we just do not have these teams that are drafting quarterbacks for the hell of it because they don't like their current quarterback and they're just going to take a shot on the dark on whoever the hell is ranked as the 4th, 5th, 6th best quarterback, because why the hell not do that in the third round? Maybe it is just because this is a pretty rough quarterback class, and I would imagine that has a lot to do with it. But I also think, much like I think we're going to get to a point where the quarterback market in terms of contracts, that bubble bursts. I think we're going to see that market kind of shift in a couple of years. Maybe we're getting to the point where these quarterback hungry teams are just saying, you know what, we're going to tough it out with whoever the hell we got, because I have no faith that this quarterback that I'm going to draft after 5 already went in the first round, that I'm going to get a good guy in this pick. And I'm not going to waste a second or a third round pick in a guy I don't really believe in just because I don't have a good quarterback. Like, you're just almost admitting defeat, and you're giving up the opportunity to draft a really good player at a different spot. Like, the number of times that a second round, third round quarterback of late succeeds compared to a second or third round pick at any other position, I'd have to dive into those numbers. I would imagine the success rate on second or third round quarterbacks is much, much lower than almost every other position in the second or the third round.
How much of this quarterback draft we've seen, where it's only been 3 quarterbacks so far, 2 in the first round, and then Tyler Shuck today, do you think any of this has to do with, one, Brock Purdy's success, but also that contract he gets, where a lot of these teams may say, look, if Brock Purdy's getting $55 million, we'll take that guy in round 4 or 5, not round 1. We'll wait and sit back because we don't want to pay a Brock Purdy that much money. Now, I think Brock Purdy's an excellent quarterback, deserves to get paid whatever it is he does get paid this offseason. But do you think any of this has to do with Brock Purdy's contract situation and his success as the last pick in the NFL draft a couple years ago?
I don't know about that. I think maybe there are teams that are more willing, and I think this has always been smart business. Not that you ever expect like you're going to hit the bullseye in the 6th or the 7th round on a quarterback that turns out to be, Tom Brady or even just Brock Purdy, which is still amazing return on the investment of the 7th round and the very last pick of the draft. Like, you could not get better value than that. So I'm not trying to disrespect Brock Purdy at all, but of course not nearly in the level of Tom Brady. I don't know if that necessarily discourages teams from drafting quarterbacks maybe in the 2nd or the 3rd round. I think maybe it it encourages just taking flyers late in the draft, like in the 5th, 6th, or 7th round. I think if this was a normal quarterback draft, we probably would see the normal amount. But I mean, honestly, you see, like, oftentimes you see 4 quarterbacks in the first round, and maybe you get 1 or 2 in the second, but like, this just was an extremely weak quarterback class. So maybe I'm making too much of this as maybe it's not really that surprising, and more so it's just because of the talent of this quarterback class. But I'm just glad to see that there aren't teams out there that are just so absolutely quarterback hungry that they get to a spot where they're up in the 2nd or the 3rd round and they decide to take someone like Will Howard. Like, okay, Will Howard, won a national championship with Ohio State, but do any of us believe he's going to be a day 1 starter in the NFL? No, of course not. Oh, we're going to draft Riley Leonard. He can really use his legs, right? He went to the national championship game. I'm not going to, this pains me to say, I'm going to draft a Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round because he had so much success at 3 different schools.
He's a gamer, baby.
He is a gamer, and I love me some Dylan Gabriel in college. I don't think he's going to be a very good pro, but I'm just happy for teams that they're showing at least enough self-awareness to not just take a shot in the dark at quarterback because they are currently very upset with their QB situation, and they're just like, you know what? All right, let's do a 3rd round. Take this guy who's probably not going to play a snap for us in his career, and let's just hope and pray that he turns into Brock Purdy. That just seems like really bad business to me.
See, I think if you're a Niner fan, though, you want teams to do that so you can get better players to fall to you.
I'm with you. You want everyone else to be stupid. Yes.
Right. Right. So it is a little painful knowing that teams aren't being as stupid this year as previous seasons. So that does kind of come back to bite you. But I do think you're right that the NFL is kind of getting smarter to what maybe a quarterback's value may be. And also, there weren't many teams walking into this year that truly needed quarterbacks. And the Saints are probably eyeing next year's draft, or in 2 years maybe. Maybe that's the Archie Manning pick from Texas. And in a couple of years, Drew Allard's probably coming out next year from Penn State. Yeah. There's plenty of more talent coming out next year. So the Giants got their guy, but they could be on a 2-year window. And the Browns could still take Shadur Sanders here at pick 94. And that's pretty good value for a player that you need a quarterback. You got Kenny Pickett, you got Joe Flacco, you got Deshaun Watson that no one likes anymore. You can get you get Shadur Sanders as your quarterback too. To learn behind Joe Flacco, it's not a bad move. So I do wonder if he goes soon, but it would be, I don't know if it'd be like a pie in the face or a clown show if Shadur Sanders, who was projected to be a first-round pick by many teams or many pundits, which, funny enough, a quarterback goes to Seattle right here, not named Shadur Sanders, in Jalen Milroe from Alabama.
Wow.
Like that, Shador is the 5th quarterback off the board.
At best. At best.
Right. He could be the 6th. Like, what's going on? Day 2 made the most sense for him. Maybe he still goes here, but I'm shocked. And honestly, good. I'm happy for the Seattle Seahawks to get a quarterback that is a big project. That's a big project player right there. So thank you so much, Seattle. Great runner, but he's going to have to sit almost the entirety of Sam Darnold's contract. So thank you, Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, so if you missed that, Jalen Milroe, Alabama quarterback, has just been taken by the Seattle Seahawks, 92nd overall pick. We're getting towards the end of the 3rd round. We get the supplemental picks coming up at the very end of this round. 49ers are picking 100th overall. Right now on the clock are the New Orleans Saints at 93rd overall. So we are inching closer to the 49ers making their 4th selection here in the 2025 NFL Draft. They had a pick in the 1st, Mykel Williams, a pick in the 2nd, Alfred Collins, Nick Martin, linebacker, earlier here in the 3rd, and then whoever's coming up at 100 overall. But Jalen Milroe is the pick for the Seattle Seahawks quarterback out of Alabama. A couple of other picks right before this, as we keep an eye on what's going on around the NFC West. The LA Rams, they went with Josiah Stewart, an edge rusher out of Michigan. What else of import? We mentioned Jordan Birch to Arizona, the defensive lineman from Oregon to the Cardinals. Cardinals having a really, really good draft. Interesting draft pick there by the Seattle Seahawks. Again, with Jalen Milroe, the quarterback out of Alabama. He's QB4 off the board, and we're still awaiting Shadur Sanders at this stage, and we are getting very near the end of the first round, or of the third round. Okay, Sterling, we are nearing the Niners pick. They have the 100th overall selection. We are currently sitting on the Saints. They're on the clock at 93 overall. This is probably going to be a very similar conversation to the one we had about an hour ago when the Niners were last on the clock. What is on the table for the 49ers here? Because the guy that we perhaps wanted them to pick on the offensive line is still a possibility out there. You take a look at the guy from William & Mary, Charles Grant. He is still out there to be had. Odds that he lasts all the way to 100. Maybe the Niners take him there. Offensive tackle, offensive lineman, defensive line. I would imagine they're not going to go linebacker again. Maybe they go running back. Maybe they go tight end. Who the hell knows? What do you think is on the table? What are the Niners considering here as they are approaching territory for the 100th overall pick?
Well, if you want to go back to the defense, I think David Walker from Central Arkansas, the edge rusher, go get that pass rusher, pair him with Micah Williams. It's a good value here at pick 100 if he's still there. If you want to go to the offensive line, again, Charles Grant is still there. Marcus Bowe, who can play guard, tackle, and center. He has that Shanahan build. He's athletic, quick first step, good burst. There is some anchor issues with him, some weight issues, so can help you on day one, but probably isn't going to be a starter on day one. And there's Miles Frazier from LSU. He fits the scheme with the wide zone. He does fit that Kyle Shanahan guard that he likes. So that's kind of your top three offensive linemen. I'm not somebody that believes they want to get a center in this year's draft. I know that pains you, Mark, to not replace Jake Brendel.
Jared Wilson of Georgia is sitting there, Sterling.
I just, Kyle and rookie centers just don't go together. That is the anti-peanut butter and jelly for him.
Well, if you don't want a rookie center, that means you're going to have to sign a center in free agency, and they also don't want to do that, at least not a good one. So I don't know how else are you going to get your hand on a good center if you don't want to draft one?
Oh, 2 words. Matt Hennessy, baby. 2-year contract last year. He'll be there. But, I mean, man, the picks on the board are interesting because you're getting towards, the day 3 picks, coming up in the next few picks or so. And there are some guys that bleed over, but do you want to get the best last pass rusher as an edge? I would. Do you want to get the best last pass rushing defensive tackle? I would. You don't pick until 113, I believe, so there isn't that much space in between your next picks, but I'd go David Walker, go back to the defense, and hope at pick 113 you can get one of those guards, Marcus Bowe, Charles Grant, who can also be a tackle, or even Miles Frazier, or maybe make a trade up. Get a deal done on day 3, but I think one of those players should be certainly in the works for San Francisco here at pick 100.
We're approaching the Niners on the clock. The Saints at pick 93 just went with a safety, Jonas Sanker out of Virginia, so that's the pick at 93 overall. Currently on the clock now, the Cleveland Browns at 94 overall. The 49ers next on the clock at 100 overall. So we are approaching the Niners' 4th pick in this 2025 NFL Draft. Do you want some good news, Sterling, that is entirely unrelated to the NFL Draft?
I think I may know what it is, but of course I want some good news, Mark. I will give it to you anyway. This comes courtesy of Ian Rappaport of NFL Network. Tight end George Kittle was back in the building today for off-season conditioning as the two sides continue to discuss a contract extension. Of course, there was some drama earlier in the week when he was not in attendance, and there was a report from Diana Rossini of The Athletic saying that his absence was contract-related, and then George Kittle responded to her on Twitter and said, your sources are wrong. Someone asked him, who are your sources, George? And George responded saying, me, because I'm George freaking Kittle. But good news, I guess. I don't know how many of us were actually that concerned about this. I guess considering the way contract negotiations have gone for the 49ers of late, maybe it was right to be concerned. No agreement has been reached as of this second yet, Sterling, and I would imagine it's not something the Niners are going to be actively doing while the NFL draft is going on, but good to see at least in between picks. Don't be doing that, Niners. You need all the help you can get on the draft, but good to see at least that George Kittle is back in the facility at this moment. Yeah, I mean, look, I never bought into the Kittle, oh, he's not here for pre-draft voluntary workouts. I watched WrestleMania. He was in the front row for 2 days.
Yeah.
I was like, George never comes to the voluntary workouts pre-draft, so I wasn't shocked by it. Quite frankly, when I saw it, I was like, this is a story? We care about this? I know it was because Brock was there and Fred was there, but Kittle wasn't.
Well, I mean, considering the last couple of years, for the Niner fans, and I don't blame them, they are just, they're really scared about, holdouts and about it hijacking an offseason. Not that you expect that from George Kittle, but I mean, that has happened in consecutive off seasons now, and now you're staring at it with Brock Purdy potentially. You don't want it to happen with George Kittle.
When George Kittle starts going on the Pivot podcast with a different quarterback saying, I want to play with that guy and I'll play for that team, we can have that deeper conversation. But George Kittle deserves to be in the Frank Gore, Patrick Willis, Joe Staley contingent of lifelong 49ers. Gore didn't get to do that, unfortunately, but George Kittle is a 49er forever, red and gold. He's going to be a Hall of Famer one day. And if he's not a San Francisco 49er, it's a shame on whoever didn't get that deal done. He belongs here in San Francisco. He screams red and gold. He's a tone setter. And I don't care he's 31 years old. Sign him to a 3-year deal. Sign him to a 4-year deal. I don't care if he's 40 years old. If he's getting 1,000-yard seasons and 10-plus touchdowns, you can play as long as you want in San Francisco, George. You can take my paycheck if you want. I want to see you on Sunday, Mondays, and Thursdays, brother. And hopefully one day, holding that Lombardi trophy, wearing the red and gold one day.
Yeah, he deserves it. He deserves it. There's no doubt. Okay, time for a break here on draft night on the game. The Browns are currently on the clock, 94th overall. We're getting towards the very tail end of the third round of the NFL draft. 96 is the end of the normal third round, and then picks beyond that are supplementary. The Vikings, Miami, although traded to the Raiders. So Vikings, Raiders, Giants, Niners, then Rams and Lions to wrap up the third round. We will tell you who the Niners pick next segment. Oh, they might make a trade, but we'll tell you what the Niners do next segment. We shall see. And we'll tell you, of course, anything else that happens of importance around this NFL draft. Plenty more to get into. It's draft night on the game. Sterling Bennett, Marc, Grandi with you. More next here on 95.7 The Game.
23rd pick in the 2025 class, the 49ers select Alfred Collins, D-tackle, Texas.
Now back to draft night on 95.7 The Game.
Yeah, that was the 49ers' first pick today, their second overall selection in the 2025 NFL Draft. That was Alfred Collins, as announced by Julian Peterson, of course, former Niner. Alfred Collins, defensive tackle out of Texas. He followed Mykel Williams yesterday in round number 1, 11th overall. Mykel Williams, an edge rusher, defensive end out of Georgia. So it goes Williams, D-end out of Georgia, Alfred Collins, defensive tackle out of Texas, and then most recently, early in the third round, Nick Martin, linebacker out of Oklahoma State. And the 49ers are just a handful of picks away from being back on the clock, because right now on the clock, the Houston Texans at 97 overall. A lot of trades of late. In fact, 3 consecutive trades. Kansas City traded to New England, Philadelphia traded to Atlanta, and now Minnesota picking 97th overall. They just traded to the Houston Texans, and the Raiders are on the clock after this, coming up at number 99 overall. In fact, it's now been traded. The Raiders are picking at 98, and the Raiders are also picking at 99. They made another trade. A lot of trades going on right now. The Niners, what you need to know is the Niners have the pick coming up at 100. We'll let you know who the Niners pick. A couple of interesting ones have just come off the board, though, Sterling. As we went to break, Dillon Gabriel becomes the latest quarterback off the board. That's now quarterback 5 off the board, right? Dillon Gabriel, quarterback 5 out of Oregon to the Cleveland Browns at 94 overall. A name I threw out there was a potential Niner target at 100, although a guy you shot down because Shanahan hates drafting centers. Jared Wilson out of Georgia. He goes to the Patriots, 95th overall. And then a name that someone on our Boxer and Gerson work injury attorneys text line liked, Xavier Watts, safety out of Notre Dame. He goes to the Falcons at 96 overall. So a couple of interesting ones there for the 49ers. With Sterling, we're just a couple of picks away. It'll go Raiders, then Niners, 98, 99, and 100. You still feeling like this is going to be a defensive pick? We're going to go 4 in a row on defense. You still have an opportunity to get someone to help you on the offensive line. Now that we have a better picture of who will be available, what do you think the Niners do here at 100 overall, Sterling?
I still want to lean defense, but that Nicholas Martin pick has kind of thrown me through a loop here where maybe they want to pick their guys where they don't, the value at this pick maybe isn't defense for them. There's a couple guys on the board that were in for visits. One of those I already said, David Walker, Marcus Bowe from Purdue, even receiver Alec Manor from Stanford was at the local pro day and has a pretty good relationship with the organization. So if you are a fan that wants a wide receiver and want that true X receiver, and maybe it could be San Francisco preparing for a day where Jawan Jennings and or Brandon Ayuk aren't here. Maybe that's the pick. But the need really isn't there at receiver to take one here. But I think defense, you have to get, if you're going to draft run defending defensive linemen, you have to match them and pair them with pass rushers. And right now, San Francisco does not have a interior pass rusher or an edge rusher that can get to the quarterback at a consistent rate. You like Mykel Williams. He's going to be a good player, probably for a decade plus in the NFL if he can stay healthy. You love Alfred Collins. Those are run stuffers you hope can grow. You got to find your pass rushers. You got to find your Javon Hargraves. You got to find your Kerry Hyders. I know that isn't a big name, but those type of players that can get to the quarterback double-digit times during the season. So in Saleh we trust, I guess, this year, and we'll see what happens.
Well, I mean, a name you threw out there as potentially the pick at 75, Charles Grant, the tackle, offensive lineman from William & Mary is still out there. I mean, they could go back and get him now at 100 overall, and I don't think any of us could be that upset at an offensive lineman here at 100 overall, Sterling.
Which, Mark, you're kind of hitting on something where maybe San Francisco saw, hey, Nicholas Martin may be a reach, but we can get those guys we like in round 4 or pick 100, and maybe they can still get the pass rusher, the offensive lineman they like in the next 2 picks or so, which may make the Nicholas Martin pick look less like a reach after the next few picks. But whether it is Marcus Bowe or Charles Grant, who, funny enough, if you take Charles Grant, he's a project. He's not going to be this like guaranteed, starter, or you're not going to be this like bona fide day 1 pick for you. So you take kind of 2 projects back to back, or at least in Nicholas Martin's case, a guy who may be a bench depth player in year 1. It's not going to make too many fans happy. I think you have to find a hitter here. You have guys on base. Alfred Collins is at second base. Michael Williams is on third base. Get somebody to bring those guys home for you at pick 100.
Well, the Raiders just made their pick at 98 overall. They'll be on the clock again at 99 overall. The Raiders do go offensive line, but it is not Charles Grant. They go Caleb Rogers, who played, I believe, Sterling, a tackle at college, but maybe projects a little bit more as a guard at the professional level at a Texas Tech. Caleb Rogers is the pick for the Raiders, 98 overall. Interesting there. They do go offensive line. We'll see what they do at 99 overall. And then the Niners coming up at 100. You're talking about the Nick Martin pick. I want to make something clear. And what we were talking about Nick Martin when the pick came in, both you and I thinking it's a little bit of a reach, really means nothing about the player himself. The player could be amazing, and he could step on the field day 1, be a starter alongside Fred Warner, and look like Dre Greenlaw. He could be that, and I'm not dismissing that as a possibility. All I'm saying is, and we've gotten a lot of feedback on this, both on the text line, on the YouTube chat, on social media. Of course, the 49ers know so much more than either of us. Me specifically, Sterling, you did so much more work on all of these guys than I did. It has nothing to do with the player. My major point, and I think you're in lockstep with me on this, Sterling, is my only point is considering where the general consensus was on a player like Nick Martin, you better have believed that he would not have been available at 100. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how good of a player he is, because you could have had him later on. He could be the best player in this draft. If you are certain that he's going to be there at 100, why take him at 75? I just hope the Niners, Sterling, have, for some reason, the belief that he would not have lasted that long. And if that is what they're going off of, then I have absolutely no problem with it, as long as they love the guy. And I would imagine they do, considering they drafted him well before anyone expected him to go.
It brings me back to, I don't know exactly what year it was, but the Patriots drafted a center, and they asked Sean McVay about it, and he was like, that guy in the first round, who saw that coming? And sometimes you hit and you get a pick which is heralded as a reach at whatever pick you're taking. In this case, Nicholas Martin at pick 75. And sometimes you look great. You outsmart the competition, if you will. And the Niners are really good at doing that on day 3, round 5, round 4, round 6. And maybe it is this jaded mentality against round 3, because it has been so hit or miss for them, where you see a player and you're like, this is where San Francisco reaches all the time. And so for Nicholas Martin here, we are not saying he can't be a great player. What we're saying is that the consensus boards, where most scouts and pundits, and again, the consensus had him ranked, they all thought day 3 UDFA, but if they hit and San Francisco gets a home run or a starter, then who cares? It's a win. Thumbs up, you're awesome. And we'll all sit back and say we're wrong. And in that case, I'm really hoping we are wrong here, because San Francisco needs that number 2 linebacker opposite Fred Warner.
Yeah, I'm with you. Okay, so we mentioned the Raiders back-to-back picks, 98 and 99. We mentioned the 98th pick. They go offensive lineman Caleb Rogers out of Texas Tech. They go offensive line again, Sterling, 99, and it is the guy that we have spent a lot of time talking about, Charles Grant, tackle out of William and Mary, 6'5", 311 pounds. He goes to the Raiders at 99 overall, just 1 pick before the 49ers at 100. Who knows? The Niners, even if Charles Grant was available, they might not have picked him. But let's just extend our metaphor, extend our conversation from Nick Martin. Let's say the Niners would have picked Charles Grant at 100 overall. This is the risk you run by maybe getting a player you like more in Nick Martin than Charles Grant, when you could have flip-flopped it and you might have ended up with both. Who knows if that's how it would have played out? Who knows if they even would have picked him here if they had the opportunity? But now they don't even have the opportunity, and we'll see where they go. We'll see where they decide to go. If this was a pick made by the Raiders that changes their plans or not, who knows? We'll probably never know. But Charles Grant is officially off the board, and he is unavailable to the 49ers at 100 overall.
And that's something San Francisco, I'm sure, had to weigh. Do you, or are you okay risking not getting a potential left guard, a potential starting tackle at the NFL level? Maybe not in year 1, but in year 2, year 3, when the guys on your roster are off the roster and hit free agency. But if they felt that, we're okay taking that risk, then okay. That's the guy you wanted. That's the guy you got. Or there is a world where they are sitting back like, oh, crap, that was our next pick. One pick away. Didn't see the Raiders taking 2 offensive tackles back-to-back. And they can be sitting there saying, like, well, next man up, which could be still a great player. But you're right, Mark. There is a risk in reaching, at least from the consensus standpoint. And when you do that, you can miss on really good players if you don't pick them when they're on the board. And I think San Francisco did leave better players on the board based on today's standard and a year 1 impact. But I pick 100, they can make up for that quote unquote reach here. Whether it is, I know Jed York tweeted out just now. Can't measure heart. # nickel for your thoughts. Does that mean cornerback? What does that mean?
Oh, God.
What's going on, Jed?
Who the hell knows what that means? Jed York, he is like Pete Carroll yesterday announcing that he's tweeting out draft clues and draft hints.
Let me say this, though. If it is a cornerback, I am pounding the table for Kobe Bryant out of Kansas.
Okay.
He screams not Shadur Sanders, my goodness. He screams Diamador Lenore. He just wants to get in receivers' faces, talk trash, lock them down. And when he does it, let them know about it. But maybe nickel for your thoughts means absolutely nothing for the defense.
We got the pick. Here it is.
Right here.
We got the pick.
In the 2025 NFL Draft, the San Francisco 49ers select Upton Stout, defensive back, Western Kentucky.
All right, there it is. The 100th overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft is Upton Stout, a cornerback out of Western Kentucky, 5'9", 181 pounds, a 5-year senior out of Western Kentucky. He's 23 years old. A 3-year starter at Western Kentucky. He lined up at nickel corner in the defensive coordinator Tyson Summers' scheme. So the clue that you took from Jed York, Sterling, was spot on. A nickel cornerback, Upton Stout out of Western Kentucky. Who knows if he's going to be, the nickel cornerback from day one, but the Niners feel pretty darn good about their other 2 corners in Diamador Lenore and Renardo Green right now. They had success with defensive backs in last year's draft in Renardo Green and Malik Mustafa, and now they go Upton Stout, pick 100, and they're 4 picks in now, Sterling, all 4 on the defense. Defensive lineman on the edge, defensive tackle inside, and then you've got a linebacker and a cornerback. Sterling, your thoughts on Upton Stout, corner out of Western Kentucky?
I really like this pick for San Francisco. It wasn't my guy. It wasn't Kobe Bryant out of Kansas, but a lot of the same traits translate to Upton Stout. He was in for a top 30 visit, I think, so there is more of that comfortability factor with him. He can play nickel. He can also play outside. A smaller cornerback, but San Francisco really doesn't mind those kind of players. Also, incredibly quick, a 4.4 40, ran almost 20 miles an hour this year at the Gauntlet, and was one of the fastest cornerbacks at the combine. So you're getting speed. You have fluid hips to take on those bigger slot receivers and smaller slot receivers. And in NFL, where you're seeing teams have 3 tremendous wide receivers, you got to have 3 really good cornerbacks. And the great thing about him is he's competitive, he's feisty, and if he does become a starter this year or next year, the Niners would have 3 starting cornerbacks that can play outside and in the nickel. So they like the versatility. They can play the matchups. He's probably not going to be a very big impact player in year one, but that cornerback 3 position is open for grabs. You like Trey Brown, but that is an open spot for you. So you get a feisty guy in that room who wants to fight, who wants to be competitive. It can be any man's job during training camp this year.
He played 12 games last year at Western Kentucky, had 52 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss. One of them was a sack, had 2 passes defensed, 1 interception. Also 1 interception with Western Kentucky in 2023, but only played in 7 games as his season was cut short due to injury. 14 games, 11 starts with Western Kentucky in 2022, where he had 6 passes defensed and 4 interceptions. So he had 4 INTs in 2022, 1 each in 23 and 24. Prior to that, he played in 12 games over 2 years at North Texas. He had the opportunity to play elsewhere for his final season in the NFL after he had a really good 2023, albeit in limited games. He had the opportunity to transfer to Ole Miss, to Michigan, to USC, to Cincinnati, to Houston, and a few other places. He ultimately decided to return to Western Kentucky. And I think he might have had the ability to go to Michigan, but once Jim Harbaugh left, he decided against going to Michigan and return to Western Kentucky and put on another solid year for the Hilltoppers in 2024. Let me just read this little blurb about the newest Niner cornerback Upton Stout out of Western Kentucky. This comes courtesy of Dane Brugler via The Athletic. Quote, in coverage, Stout has a balanced pedal and pitter-pat footwork to cleanly mirror and stay attached to different types of route runners. His aggressive nature gives him a noticeable swagger versus both pass and run. He prefers press man to off man because he wants in on the action. That aggressiveness will lead to flags and overzealous decisions, though. Overall, Stout's lack of inches shows versus size in coverage, but so does his competitive urgency in controlled movements in all areas of the position. He projects as a slot cornerback who can be a role player similar to Avonte Maddox. So that little blurb there, Sterling, courtesy of Dane Brugler of The Athletic. It fits exactly what Jed York is talking about. The 5'9" Upton Stout. As Jed York says, quote, you can't measure heart.
Yeah, San Francisco values players that, 1, are high effort, 2, on defense especially, want to get their hands dirty, right? The offense is no block, no rock. On defense is kind of no run defense, you don't play at all. So you see a team that when you see cornerbacks, Lenoir, Renardo Green, previous years, Travarius Ward, Ambry Thomas to a certain extent, albeit he was a smaller cornerback. But there's a reason why guys like Lenoir take off in this defense, because they have the effort. They're pesky, they're feisty. They don't mind taking on bigger body guys. They'll take on blocks, and they want to tackle. Upton Stout wants to do all those things. Again, what is the ceiling? Time will tell, but I think a pretty good bounce back for San Francisco. Clearly wanting to stick on the defense, wanting to reshape it. Whether Saleh's here for 1 year or 2, they are clearly giving him the keys to make all of these picks and say, look, Robert, whether it's a 1-year stay or a 2-year vacation, we need your help in a desperate way. And all their picks have been on his side of the football. So this Niners defense will look different and hopefully better in 2025, knowing you have players like Alfred Collins, Micah Williams, Nicholas Martin, and Upton Stout playing roles for you next season.
Upton Stout is the pick for the 49ers. For what it is worth, again, this is just one man's opinion. Dane Brugler of The Athletic lists Upton Stout as a 5th-round pick. He has a 5th-round grade on him, but the Niners...
It's a reach!
The Niners, they are famous for this, or maybe infamous is the better word. They do not care what the outside opinion is on these players. They just go and do whatever their board suggests, as you should do. They just tend to have a lot of difference in their rankings than I think a lot of other people do. But they get Nick Martin and Upton Stout here in the 3rd round. You add that to Micah Williams and to Alfred Collins. All 4 players on the defensive side of the football. You have at least 1 player at all 3 levels now. You have 2 on the defensive line, 1 in the linebacking core, and 1 in the defensive secondary, and Upton Stout at cornerback. You're right. I mean, this could be a 1-year rehab your image for Robert Saleh, then get another head coaching offer next cycle, and he could leave. I don't think the Niner fans want that to happen, but if that does happen, that probably means the Niners defense would have a great year coming up. So maybe you do want that to happen. But even if Robert Saleh does leave in a year, Sterling, at the very least, the Niners are going to be building their defense for years to come based on this one draft right now. And I would definitely imagine that Robert Saleh has a lot to do with these 4 picks.
And it's also important to talk about when you're discussing reaches that it may be a reach because that cornerback falls as a 5th-round pick on a board, in Dane Brugler's case, his board, but he may be the 3rd nickelback. And San Francisco may sit back and say, we need that position. There's guys like Jacob Parrish at Kansas State who already got picked earlier in the draft. So San Francisco may have said, if we don't get that guy, the 3rd best nickelback in this year's draft, we're not going to get him at all. And we value that position. So more so in this case than linebacker, I can see San Francisco reaching on a player, if you want to call it that here, knowing that he's going to be a nickelback. Those guys usually don't go early in drafts, and he may have been the best one still there. So this one I'm less convicted to call a reach compared to Nicholas Martin, but I think it's a good pick. He fits what they want to do. And it really feels like the last couple years, San Francisco's signed some players that may not have been their type of player. Chase Young, Randy Gregory via trade, Leonard Floyd, Malik Collins, Jordan Elliott, those guys. Many of those guys no longer here for a variety of reasons, but it does seem like they're getting back to basics, getting back to the culture, getting their type of defensive players like Lenore, Green, Mustafa, maybe Nicholas Martin, Michael Williams, Alfred Collins. Their draft class so far is screaming, we're getting back to that solid, wide 9 defensive culture. Let's start eating up offenses. So it's hard to dislike what they've done so far because this defense, where the offense blinked, you want the defense to pick up the pieces, and it couldn't last year. You have a better head coach now, better personnel, and the expectations aren't sky high, but they are certainly higher than they were last season.
Yeah, Sterling, you mentioned you don't expect necessarily Upton Stout, Niners' most recent pick, cornerback, and played a lot of nickel at college from Western Kentucky. You don't expect him necessarily to have a huge impact right away. Who's going to play nickel for the Niners? Because I know a lot of us, we've had Diamador Lenore play a lot of nickel in his career, but when you're essentially asking him to fill in for Mooney Ward now, who's no longer a 49er, I think you like Diamador Lenore and Renardo Green as your 2 outside corners. It leaves some unknowns elsewhere, Trey Brown, Chase Lucas. Who do you, if it's not going to be Upton Stout, who do you think is the Niners nickel cornerback come week 1?
While you'd prefer a rookie to take the big leap in training camp and start day 1, obviously if Upton Stout does, we're all singing the praises of Robert Saleh. What a great pick. But I'm under the impression that there's going to be a combination of Lenore and Renardo Green, but I would probably pick at the moment Renardo Green. They brought in Trey Brown. He's an outside cornerback. I can even see them playing some 3 safety sets. Jason Pinnock is there. They brought him in to be a playmaker in the box safety. So there is many things they can do on defense, but just based on walking into year 1 for a cornerback like Upton Stout, the expectation is probably sit for 4 to 5 weeks, similar to how Green sat behind Isaac Yiadom, and hopefully usurp them halfway through a season. And
kind of similar, it's a different position, obviously, but at safety in Jair Brown's rookie year, he was behind a couple of dudes there, and then Talanoa Hufanga got hurt midway through the year. Jair Brown stepped in. The Niners defense didn't really miss a beat, and they went all the way to the Super Bowl, although they lost, but he did intercept Patrick Mahomes in that Super Bowl. Didn't have the best sophomore season, but that rookie season did kind of follow a similar path, and maybe something like that is on the table for Upton Stout. Okay, the 3rd round is officially over, and the 49ers make 4 picks, all on the defense. Michael Williams, a defensive end. Alfred Collins, a defensive tackle. Nick Martin, a linebacker. And now Upton Stout, a corner, has played mostly nickelback in college at Western Kentucky. And the 3rd round is over, not just for the Niners, but for everybody. The headline, and if you're watching on ESPN right now, you see it, Shadur Sanders has still not been picked. We'll talk more about this Niner draft, the first 3 rounds as a whole, and a whole lot more. We're with you until 10 o'clock tonight. Still an hour and a half left with you. It's Sterling Bennett, Marc, Grandi with you. Time for your comments, your texts, your calls, your YouTube chats, all that and more. 888-957-9570 and on YouTube at youtube.com/957thegame. Sterling and Grandi back with more next on Draft Night on 95.7 The Game.
Draft, the San Francisco 49ers select Upton Stout, defensive back, Western Kentucky.
Now back to Draft Night on 95.7 The Game.
And that pick closes out the 49ers' second day of the 2025 NFL Draft. They made 4 picks, a pick in the first, a pick in the second, and 2 in the third. And that pick you just heard, Upton Stout, cornerback, Western Kentucky, closes the door on day 2 for the 49ers. They go Mykel Williams, 11 overall, defensive end out of Georgia. 43rd overall, Alfred Collins, defensive tackle out of Texas. 75th overall, Nick Martin, a linebacker out of Oklahoma State. And then 100th overall, it is Upton Stout, a cornerback out of Western Kentucky. Those are the 4 picks for the 49ers through the first 3 rounds. Day 3 of the draft gets going tomorrow, beginning at 9 Pacific time, noon Eastern. The rest of the draft, rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7 kick off, and they will all take place tomorrow. Niners currently slated to make 7 more picks. We'll see if perhaps they consolidate a couple of those picks and turn it into maybe just 6 more picks. We shall see what the Niners do on day 3, the third and final day of the draft coming up tomorrow. Welcome back. It's draft night here on The Game. Sterling Bennett, Marc, Grandi with you. Sterling, do you want to hear a pretty impressive stat about Upton Stout? Because I got one for you.
I'm ready, Marc. Give it to me.
Okay, how about this? Over the last 2 seasons, Upton Stout has not allowed a touchdown as the nearest defender in coverage on 409 coverage snaps. Pretty darn good. Has not allowed a touchdown as the nearest defender in coverage over 409 snaps over the last 2 seasons.
I think not allowing opposing offenses into the end zone is a pretty good thing to have.
It's important.
If you're a defender, and for a team that unfortunately let too many teams reach the end zone over and over again, not bad. I'll give you not a better stat, but I think an equally impressive one.
I'm ready.
For a team that needs run defense, especially on the boundary, Upton Stout last year at Western Kentucky, a 90.9 PFF run defense grade and a 79.5 tackling grade. So you're getting yourself a guy that, like Dane Brugler said, wants to get his nose dirty, get that aggressive nature. And as Jay Dork put it, you cannot count out heart. And Upton Stout looks like he has the heart to be a really good run defender at the NFL level.
Okay, so let's try to find the correlation between these picks, Sterling, because they all are on the defense. That's the obvious connection. But you got Mykel Williams, a defensive end. You see edge or DE attached to him. You think, pass rusher, right? He's going to get to the quarterback and he's going to sack him. And that's going to happen sometimes, although his career high is only 5 sacks. And for a guy that goes 11 overall as an end, that's not a gigantic number. But the Niners feel like he's the best edge setter in collegiate football that was available to be drafted this year. So he's a pretty good edge defender versus the run. Okay, so your first pick, maybe his best attribute, at least currently, he has the ability, he has the talent, he has the athleticism to become a really good pass rusher. But at least as of right now, it seems like his best attribute is as a run defender. Okay, that's pick number 1. Then you got D tackle Alfred Collins, big body in the middle of your defensive line. He is not a pass rusher, not really much at all, and that's kind of the norm for defensive tackles, although there are some exceptions like Javon Hargrave, who was a Niner, maybe one of the best at his best when he was playing really good football, one of the best interior pass rushers. Malik Collins was somewhat similar for the 49ers last year as well, but Alfred Collins is kind of your prototypical run stopper. Okay, that's the second pick. What about the third pick? Nick Martin, linebacker from Oklahoma State. While maybe you and I feel like it was a bit of a reach, I mean, when the dude is right, he's a tackle machine, and he's gonna put his nose in there and try to make tackles of running backs often as well. And then you have what you just laid out about Upton Stout, the corner from Western Kentucky. Sterling, it seems pretty clear to me the Niners' emphasis isn't just defense. It is, we have to make sure that we are tackling these running backs before they get rumbling, because that was what took the Niners from being in contention for winning a Super Bowl a little more than a year ago, to this past season, not even making the postseason. Their run defense was maybe like public enemy number one.
Yeah, I think with the picks they've made so far, and everything you said is right, Mark, that San Francisco last year, it felt like they were waiting for the game to come to them. It was like they weren't in control of what was actually happening on defense. It was, can they make a play? The odds are not in their favor in that case, but also it felt like they were caught off guard, if you will, caught flat-footed, caught like they didn't want to make a play at times. You had Mustafa, who played like he wanted to make a play. You had Lenore, who played great last year. But on the interior, on the defensive line, it was Nick Bosa and nobody else. Then you lose Dre Greenlaw, and we saw the impact of Ufunga and Greenlaw when they were healthy against the Rams for a half, and we all said, "Oh, there's the defense. That's what's what this team could be." And now we're sitting back here in 2025, and some of those players are gone. But it sounds like they got 2 run defenders in the first 2 picks that they hope can grow into good pass rushers who are powerful, can move some guards and tackles around, free up some space. But also in the later 2 picks, despite maybe us liking Upton Stout more than Nicholas Martin, they got 2 guys that play with their hair on fire. They're athletes. They're strong. They're feisty. They want to get their hands dirty. And, those guys do hang around the NFL for a long time. When you can grab the brass ring, that matters in the NFL and matters in life. So I think, again, we'll see how these players translate to the NFL in training camp and OTAs and once the real season begins. But they're getting high-end athletes. They're getting guys they believe can take their mentality from college and translate it to the NFL. And if it happens, you can get good players that way. So you may want to say it's the Dre Greenlaw replacement, or you're getting a starting nickel back, and you very well may, but you're at least getting strong depth pieces, which then begins the conversation of value in the 3rd and 4th rounds. But overall, I think, again, it's hard to not like what they're doing, knowing they had so many holes on this defense.
Yeah, you mentioned Dre Greenlaw. This is a quote from John Lynch. This comes courtesy of our friend David Lombardi at the San Francisco Standard. John Lynch on Nick Martin, who, of course, was the pick from Oklahoma State, the linebacker at 75 overall. Lynch, quote, "Our type of player all over him. He swarms to the football, and you feel his presence on the field." He added that Martin's long arms mimic Dre Greenlaw's. So not saying he's going to be Dre Greenlaw. It's a very, very, very high bar to clear, but it does feel like that was the player the Niners had in mind when they made that kind of pick. And this does feel like, we've already talked about it, like a Robert Saleh pick. The kind of guys that he likes are crazy effort, crazy energy. They're always flying to the football. And while it might at times, and this was like exactly who Dre Greenlaw was, and God love him, he was amazing. And when he went down in the Super Bowl, it's no surprise that Travis Kelce immediately took off. But he always played on the edge of reckless versus just like crazy energetic. And he would have an unnecessary roughness penalty, or he'd have a late hit out of bounds. And while you wish that he could avoid those, it's kind of what made him him, because he always played on that razor's edge. And those, Sterling, are the kinds of players that Robert Saleh loves. Robert Saleh on the sideline, I just can't wait until week 1 comes around. The Niners get a huge 3rd and 1 stop, or maybe a team goes for it on 4th and 3 and they get a stop, and you see Robert Saleh like pounding on his chest and screaming, and the veins popping out of his forehead, and he chest bumps Bosa or Fred Warner or whoever as they come running off the sideline. Like those kinds of players that you described, like running around with their hair on fire, which I think is a fair way to describe Nick Martin and Upton Stout based on what we know. Those characteristics feel like specifically Robert Saleh kind of players.
And those are characteristics that get you on the football field faster. When you play that way, when you can make plays, whether it's getting the ball back or make a big tackle, that's how you find your way into getting playing time. I think of last year, San Francisco would have done anything to have somebody like a Nicholas Martin when he's healthy play with his hair on fire, be the aggressive kind of spark plug when Devondre Campbell's playing, and you're like, what's going? This is a slow, stuck in the mud, 32-year-old linebacker that doesn't want to be here. Where Nicholas Martin is like, look, I was hurt last year, again, taken in the third round today, but he wants to prove that he belongs in the NFL and wants to prove that when he's healthy, he can be a difference maker on a defense. And I think one aspect we haven't got into just yet when it comes to Nicholas Martin, he's a really good blitzer. Again, 6 sacks in 2023. We know Saleh likes to blitz, wants to bring the pressure. He's going to run stunts. I would not be shocked to see Nicholas Martin, if he can become a good NFL player, maybe a starter at some point in time, be somebody Saleh or whoever the next DC is in a couple years utilizes to get more pressure onto the quarterback and makes big plays on third down to get pressure on, let's say, Sam Darnold or Kyler Murray or Matthew Stafford this season.
That's interesting. Do you think we're going to see, I mean, I know you mentioned stunts. Do you think we're going to see more blitzes, or maybe is it just more creative ways to bring 4 guys? Because the Niners, even when Robert Saleh was the DC, Sterling, the Niners' plan was still, and it has always been, we're going to rush 4. We're going to try to get home with 4, and if we get home with 4, it almost doesn't matter what the coverage is, at least what our coverage ability is, because we're dropping 7 guys into coverage. We feel like your 4 receivers, or however many you're putting out there into the route tree, is going to be difficult for those guys to get open versus 7 coverage defenders when we only rush 4. Do you think it's maybe just more unique 4-man rushes, and maybe you bring a linebacker, but you drop off one of your ends, or maybe a lineman into just right over the middle or right across the line of scrimmage? Or do you think with Robert Saleh coming back, we're going to see the 49ers turn to maybe a little bit more of an aggressive blitzing team?
I think had San Francisco drafted higher or maybe went edge twice in the first 2 picks, they just don't have the personnel currently to just rush 4.
Yeah.
They have 2 run defending first 2 picks in this year's draft, in Micah Williams and Alfred Collins, who you like a lot, and they're going to be good players, hopefully, at the NFL level. And you have Nick Bosa, you like a lot too, but who's playing next to Alfred Collins? I don't know.
Yeah.
And it may be someone picked tomorrow, but I think San Francisco is going to have to lean more heavily on stunts, blitzing a nickel back or blitzing a linebacker, simply because they don't have the personnel they had in previous years where they were 6-7 guys deep on the edge and anybody could get you. Maybe say Saleh stays for 2 years and they can have another draft under his belt, another free agency. That could change. But I have a hard time believing in year 1 of Saleh being back, which may be his only season, knowing the personnel they currently have. Like, let me ask you, do you trust Micah Williams, Nick Bosa, Yetur Gross-Matos, who flashed at times but got hurt last year for a large chunk, and Sam Ekwonu to get home all the time, rushing 4?
No,
I don't.
I don't feel good about that.
You trust Nick Bosa for sure. You like Samo enough, but right now they have a lot of rotational pieces that they hope can grow, but the interior is the big question mark, and that's kind of one of the biggest complaints I've seen on social media, whether it's Instagram or X or Twitter, is that Walter Nolan was that stunting pass rushing defensive tackle, and now you haven't gotten one through 2 days. So they have some work still to do, but I do think they have to get aggressive and find their pass rushers to hopefully alleviate the need to utilize stunts more often or linebacker blitzes to get home to quarterbacks.
Well, maybe this was more of an issue for other defensive coordinators not named Robert Saleh, but I also feel like the Niners, and I feel like this comes from Kyle Shanahan specifically, Sterling, they are just so stubborn when it comes to their plan defensively. And I think we can say this about Shanahan specifically in a lot of different ways, but when it comes to their principles defensively, I almost feel like it doesn't matter what the personnel is, they're just going to stick to rushing 4 because that's what they've done and it's what's made them successful. But you should always base your plan on the personnel that you have. And if the personnel proves to you over and over and over again, as it did last year, that you can't get home enough with 4, you're going to have to adjust. And maybe Robert Saleh being reintroduced back into the 49ers as the DC is enough. Maybe he has enough of a sway over Kyle Shanahan that he and the Niners are therefore able and willing to make a change. But my concern, Sterling, isn't that I disagree with you in terms of reading the overall abilities of this group. Can they get home with 4 consistently enough to make it worthwhile? No, probably not, unless someone like Mykel Williams turns into a double-digit sack guy as a rookie, which I'm not weighing out as a possibility, but I would be shocked. Unless that happens, it seems unlikely. So I'm not disagreeing with you there. But my only worry is even if the Niners feel that way, I'm not entirely convinced they're going to think it's worthwhile to blitz often enough to really make a difference.
And that may be where having a non-Nick Sorensen defensive coordinator comes into play and helps you a lot, because there were so many times last year there was incorrect play calls, there was putting guys in the wrong position to succeed, and just an overall confusion as to you have a DC who's over their head and don't really know what to do. They were the last resort. Hey, Nick, get in there and see what happens. And it's unfair to Nick Sorensen, but now he's gone, and that is its own thing. But you bring back Robert Saleh, the expectation is maybe a lot of it was a coaching problem. And now you have Saleh back in the building, and there is ways they can get home with just 4 players. I know for sure that Nick Bosa is going to be happy if it is back to that just rush 4 and get home freely. So you're at least going to have one guy happy in that room. The question is, can the other guys get it done, which has always been the problem when you had Nick Bosa being a DPOY candidate every single year, but guys next to him aren't carrying their end of the bargain.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. I know you gave me the PFF run defense grade for both Alfred Collins and for Upton Stout. Do you have that for Nick Martin? Because I know we talked about his tackles, and he's racked them up one healthy like few other linebackers, few other collegiate players at all across college football. Do you have his PFF run defense grade?
I have it for every year he played.
Okay, give it to me.
In 2024, again, didn't play the entire season, a 63.2 run defense grade. In 2023, a 59.9, so almost 60 run defense grade. But his first year at Oklahoma State, it was a 75.5 run defense grade. So not terrible, not great. There is some good signs, but I'll give you this, Mark. The last 2 years as a linebacker at Oklahoma State, an 84.4 and a 73.4 pass rushing grade, going back to he may be a blitzing linebacker at the NFL level for you. 7 sacks the last 2 years, 39 total pressures, and didn't play the entire year this past season. So there are a lot of things to dislike about the pick, but there is small points of his game where you say that can be very useful at the NFL level.
I would imagine D. Winters is probably the odds-on favorite to start alongside Fred Warner. But one thing that Fred allows a lot of things. Fred is the best linebacker in the NFL. In my opinion, bar none. The dude is just absolutely incredible. What he allows, Sterling, is you could pair him with somebody like that who's not necessarily like a specialty linebacker, but someone who you use as more of a blitzer, because Fred Warner can cover so much ground by himself that it allows not necessarily taking chances, but it allows you to play another linebacker beside him who maybe isn't like the complete player that a Fred Warner is. Now, you would love to have someone like Dre Greenlaw, a healthy Dre Greenlaw next to him, and you have 2 complete linebackers. But Fred is so good that he could cover up for his running mate that maybe isn't anywhere near as complete of a backer as he is. You get Fred and somebody else, that allows you to use someone like Nick Martin in more of a strategic role. And maybe it is. You bring him in on 3rd downs sometimes, and he rushes and he gets to the quarterback and he disrupts the play. And maybe that helps the Niners get off the field a couple of times. But Fred Warner does allow for someone like that perhaps to be a little bit more effective, or even just be used more in the first place.
And I also think having D. Winters and Fred Warner being so good in coverage allows whoever that third linebacker may be to walk in and not have to be great in coverage. They can utilize that guy in different ways. But even on top of that, I think a lot of people forget that walking into last year, I think Curtis Robinson was probably going to be the starter, and he tore his ACL against the Saints. So he's back on a one-year deal again. The ACL could be a problem going forward, maybe, but it's not just like they're walking into next season with Tatum Bethune, a 7th-round pick, and D. Winters and Warner, and now Nicholas Martin. They do have some insulation there where last year it didn't exist because Robinson got hurt, and Bethune was a rookie, and D. Winters was that kind of reckless, I can give you 30 snaps, but I'm going to hurt my back today and not going to play for a week. So there is some insulation there, and I also wouldn't be surprised if San Francisco signs a veteran, gets some more depth in the room. Eric Kendricks is still out there. You never know what could happen.
Oh, the guy who spurned the Niners last offseason?
I
agreed to a deal with the Niners and then said, you know what, I'm going to be a Cowboy now?
Hey, Mike Zimmer don't coach no more, Mark. It don't matter. He's out of the league right now, so you may be
Eric
okay.
Kendricks is the reason why Devondre Campbell was a Niner. Thanks a lot, Eric.
He has to make up for his past mistakes and pay it forward for us this year. So maybe there is something to be done. I will give you this, though. This via Tracy Sandler, who covers the San Francisco 49ers for Fangirl Sports. She said this in regards to Upton Stout. When asked if he reminds John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan about K1 Williams, they said in unison, yes. He's a really good player, claimed off waivers that became one of the best nickelbacks in football for a period of time. So they seemingly are going back to that 2019 San Francisco 49er makeup of here's your Dre Greenlaw, here's your K1 Williams, and trying to find their next nice secondary pieces during the draft this year.
One more thing about Upton Stout before we hit a quick break. This comes courtesy of Nick Wagoner, who covers the Niners for ESPN. He's in there chatting with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, or at least was a little bit ago, and we'll have some of those comments before we get on out of here tonight, hopefully. But Kyle Shanahan says the team does envision Upton Stout, newest Niner quarterback out of Western Kentucky, as more of an inside player. Nick Wagoner adds that Shanahan says there is some hope they can allow Diamador Lenore to stay outside, but that will, of course, have to play out this summer and beyond. But it seems like ideally, Sterling, the Niners get enough from Upton Stout that maybe that is enough to keep Diamador Lenore outside. But we also know last year, considering all of the issues the Niners had defensively, they kind of just had they had to move Diamador Lenore around to wherever the biggest need was. And I guess that is a really good attribute to have in one of your corners, that he can play outside and inside. But it does feel like in a perfect world, they do want to keep Diamador Lenore outside, even though he's probably by quite a bit their best nickel corner. He just might also be, him and Renardo Green, by far their two best outside corners. We shall see.
I also think San Francisco shouldn't be afraid to allow Lenore, clearly their best cornerback, one of the most underrated players in football, to shadow receivers. CeeDee Lamb, Emeka Mbuka now, the guy from Seattle, Njigba. Those guys are good slot wide receivers. Let your best cornerback shadow those guys, lock them down.
Even Cooper Kupp up in Seattle now, too.
Yeah, you're right. Like, there's a lot of players
Devontae Adams with the Rams
in the slot. It sounds like to me you're saying Lenore could play the slot a lot more this year, Mark.
might be. I might have just talked myself into it. I might have just talked myself into it. We shall see. All right, time for a break. It's 9 o'clock. We got one more hour with you here on Draft Night on 95.7 The Game. Niners, 4 picks in through 3 rounds. We'll recap all these 4 picks if you're just joining us, and we'll look ahead to tomorrow, to day 3, because I know a lot of you out there, hey, some of you might only pay attention for the first round. Some of you might only pay attention for the first 2 days, the first 3 rounds. But the Niners have made an awful lot of hay in day 3 of the draft. So what should the plan be in day 3, in rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7? We'll answer those questions for you and a whole lot more as Sterling Bennett and I, Marc Grandi, continue. It's draft night number 2 here on 95.7 The Game. We're back with more right after this.
ready to learn from those that have done it before me. I'm ready to come in and do whatever I can to win games. And, I'm going to be a good teammate to my teammates.
Now back to Draft Night on 95.7 The Game.
That was Alfred Collins, 49ers' first pick today, their second pick in this NFL draft that happened 43rd overall, 11th pick of round number 2, defensive tackle out of Texas, Alfred Collins. Sterling, we were talking earlier as we welcome you back to Draft Night here on 95.7 The Game. Sterling Bennett, I'm Marc, Grandi with you here on 95.7 The Game. We were trying to find the common characteristic out of all 4 Niner draft picks. Mykel Williams, defensive end, Georgia. Alfred Collins, who you just heard from, defensive tackle, Texas. Nick Martin, linebacker, Oklahoma State. And Upton Stout, cornerback from Western Kentucky. First of all 4 are defensive players. Second of all, it feels like they all at least are pretty darn good against the run. At least the majority of these guys are good against the run. It also seems like, and we don't really know a lot of these guys super well yet, but based on what we heard from Mykel Williams and what we heard right there from Alfred Collins, Sterling, these feel like classic 49er culture guys. That is something, you could think maybe it's overrated. You could think that the Niners could get more talent in their building if they don't really care about that much stuff, but they clearly do, and it does feel like at the very least these first 2 picks that we've heard from so far, Mykel Williams and Alfred Collins, it feels like these are a couple of culture fits as well in this 49er locker room.
The way San Francisco drafted today, not to say it's equal to that of a rebuilding team, but I do think there is some similarities. And San Francisco is more retooling, but it does seem like the defense has lost the culture a little bit. That they do want to have this culture cleanse and kind of returning back to what it once was under Robert Saleh in 2019 through 2020. With the picks they've made so far, it definitely screams that. Obviously, when you're rebuilding, you want to establish a culture. It's a new regime. It's a new gym. It's a new head coach. They want to bring their guys in, guys they believe in, guys, even if their physical tools aren't the best, if they aren't the best player, the mindset they have, the way they play, the energy they play with, if it's infectious and it can get other guys to, motivate themselves and play better, they want those guys in the building. And I think San Francisco, not to say Devondre Campbell's situation of him walking off the field and quitting mid-game is an example of them losing the plot here, but I think was a pretty big indictment, not on losing the locker room or anything, but it's more so about, where things were headed, how the season went. They need to reestablish the culture. And, I have the big board in front of me here of the consensus. The consensus says they reached 95 picks to get Nicholas Martin, and they reached 75 picks to take Upton Stout. So by the consensus, those are bona fide guaranteed reaches. Yeah. But if the mentality's right, the way they play is correct, and Robert Saleh can get something out of those guys, that's what matters here. There are players that sometimes are bigger, faster, and stronger than you, but there's a David for every Goliath. And if that can be the Davids they've drafted today, well, they can take down Goliath, maybe Patrick Mahomes one day in the Super Bowl. Fingers crossed it happens, Marc. I need a 3-peat, brother. Give me a third chance.
Oh, God. So you mentioned Nick Martin. By the consensus, a heavy reach. Do you want to feel, I know you feel all right about it. You're still a little maybe confused, but do you want to feel better about it?
Of course.
Okay, well, let's hear from Nick Martin, the newest Niner linebacker out of Oklahoma State. I've got some sound that our guys in the back are diligently getting ready for. Shout out to both Steven Risotto and to Cam Williams. Here is the newest Niner linebacker, Nick Martin, out of Oklahoma State, talking about how excited he is to get in the Niners facility and begin working. Here he is.
I mean, it's a blessing. I grew up watching the draft, and since I was 5, I wanted to be in the NFL and be the best at it and get there. And being here is surreal, and it's just a blessing. I'm excited to get to work.
Okay, so that's Nick Martin saying the generic, happy to be here, excited, being drafted is my dream. Not trying to downplay it. I'm sure he feels everything that he said, but we hear that from generally every single person that gets drafted. But this is where I think it gets good. Nick Martin, you're a linebacker, and you're being drafted to a team that employs Fred Warner. What do you think about Fred Warner?
I watch him all the time. He's like the guy that I respect the most at the linebacker position in the league. So it's an honor to get to work with him and learn from him and be the guy next to him, you know what I'm saying, and just playing with him and learning and growing. And, you know what I'm saying, I'm just excited to work with him.
All right. I mean, hey, Sterling, if there is, what's the quickest way to endear yourselves to 49er fans as a linebacker? It's to heap praise on Fred Warner. Nick Martin's a quick learner. He's already doing that.
I think he added on in a different piece earlier in his college career that he emulates and tries to emulate Fred Warner and Ray Lewis. So
it's a good combo.
If you want to be a good linebacker in the NFL, go ahead and take on two of the all-time greats right now, a Hall of Famer and I'm sure a future Hall of Famer in Fred Warner's case. And you're right, it just sometimes it's hard to see the vision from the outside, but in that room, during workouts, during meetings, maybe he's just a high IQ, he's a bookworm, he's picking all these people's minds, and maybe there are things he has to overcome. Maybe it's the knee injury he had this past year. But if he's healthy, Nicholas Martin has shown to be a phenomenal tackler, a guy who has high energy. He has that speed that you often saw with Dre Greenlaw, where you were like, Greenlaw's going to hurt somebody and it's going to be a penalty, but it's going to be really cool to watch happen on the TV or live. And sometimes it was a little too much, but Martin, I think, does play with the kind of reckless abandon that Greenlaw played with too. So there's give and take there, but when you get your guys in the building, a lot of magic can happen. So maybe it may be a reach for the consensus, but if it works out, it's a pretty darn good pick for San Francisco next to Fred Warner.
Okay, so a reach. I'm trying to remember when we were sitting here last year on day 2 of the NFL draft, and the Niners picked Renardo Green. That was also considered a reach, was it not?
Dude, we didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
We said, who is this guy?
So, I mean, and Renardo Green is now entrenched as a starter at corner for you. And he was really good down the stretch last year. So, you never know how this is going to work out. And I know you're probably thinking, if you've been with us for the last couple of hours, well, you just got done talking about how confused you were by the draft pick. Yes, it has less to do with the player and more to do with when you could have gotten him. That is the main issue. If the Niners believed that they had to pick him at 75 because they had reason to think he would not be there at 100 and they really like him, then by all means, take the guy that you like. But it is pretty simple logic. If the consensus is he's going to be around later, then take him later and use the more valuable picks that you have earlier in the draft on somebody else. Even if you love player X more than player Y, you have reason to get player Y first if you think they're going to go first. Now, maybe there is somebody else out there who they felt really loved Nick Martin, and they did not want to take that chance, and I get it. That's really the reason why I think we're confused. As it relates to Nick Martin, more on Fred Warner. What specifically, Nick, do you like about Fred Warner's game?
I like his ball hawk mentality. He always going after the ball, whether that's punching it out or interception, and how he's always around the ball, always around the guy with the ball, and just figuring out ways to force turnovers. I think that's something he really just imprinted on, really mastered, to continue to do good at. So I would say that's something I really pay attention to.
All right, and that's a Nick Martin more on what he likes about Fred Warner. And we talked about endearing yourself to 49er fans. I also think, Sterling, in that cut alone, we have our answer as to why the 49ers wanted to draft him. Of course, ability is paramount. But also, if there's one thing that Robert Saleh emphasizes as defensive coordinator, it's the ball, the ball, the ball, the ball. Take the ball away. Find ways to take the ball away. And Nick Martin says one of the characteristics he likes the most about Fred Warner is his ball hawking ability, whether it's punching the ball out or dropping back into coverage and intercepting it himself. Yes, that's a way to make yourself look good in the eyes of Robert Saleh and the 49ers defensive decision makers. Go and force a couple of turnovers, then you're going to get more playing time.
Well, it's funny, too, because we talked about the minute he was drafted he has this safety body. He's a smaller safety body. I think Dane Brugler said that from The Athletic in The Beast. But San Francisco at safety doesn't really care if you're bad in coverage or get beat over the top. as long as you get takeaways and turnovers. Jaquiski Tart was that way. Tauano Hufunga was that way. Jair Brown's that way too. They like those ball hockey. Can you get an interception? Can you break up a play? Can you force a fumble? Can you come downhill and lay a running back out? Even go back to the Harbaugh era. Dante Whitner and Deshaun Goldson. Those guys didn't mind getting beat over the top. If they can lay some wood in front of them and create a fumble.
Deshaun Goldson, oh my God.
Just taking dudes' heads off. And, Nicholas Martin isn't that kind of player per se, but you're right, Mark. You can endear yourself to your coaching staff if you get the ball back. I know Nick Sorensen isn't here, but his job when he was in San Francisco was the get the ball back kind of coach. He was the attack the ball drill coach, and I think they want to get back to that. Last year, this team did not get takeaways, did not get turnovers, and if you want to score points, the quickest way, yes, is to get in the end zone with your offense, but also get takeaways and turnovers and get your offense back on the field. And I think, with these first few picks or so this year in the draft, no offensive players. They believe in Brock Purdy and George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey and the weapons they have on offense to be good enough to win football games. Kyle Shanahan and company. The needs are more on defense, but this also tells me that they want to get their offense on the field more in 2025 and believe in the team they already have in place to score more in 2025.
Here's more Nick Martin on what he does well as linebacker. And we're focusing here on Nick Martin, linebacker out of Oklahoma State, at least for the time being, because of the 49ers' 4 picks. He's probably the one that left us scratching our heads the most after he was selected. Here is Nick Martin, again, linebacker, Oklahoma State. Niners pick 75th overall in the 3rd round on what he does best.
I would say I'm very athletic, so I like to use that to my advantage. I'm relentless. The way I always go for the kill shot, whether that's maximum effort or punishing a person with the ball, just figuring out ways to just change the tone of the game. And I'm explosive, and I'm just somebody that cares about the guy next to him, always willing to give his all for the guy next to him, and understanding that no rep should be taken for granted, and just always just giving my all each and every down. So
yeah, it's becoming pretty clear whether the Niners like this guy, Sterling.
In my notes I have here, Mark, as you go through scouting, you write things down and you just see what kind of pops off to you on the screen. Yeah. I have here, he'll overrun some plays sometimes. He'll miss some tackles here or there, but he's got the work ethic you want to see, and he'll give you 110% on the field every single time. So it comes through when he talks to the media, but also it comes through on film. And I'm sure San Francisco, the reason why they wanted him so bad out of reach at pick 75 is because of what he does on the field, the energy he plays with, and just the all-out effort he gives every single snap. Again, no plays off, no snaps off. Robert Saleh, all gas, no brakes. Yep. You're getting an all gas, no brakes kind of player in Nicholas Martin.
Here's one more. Nicholas Martin, the major concern with him is the knee injury that cost him a bunch of his last season. His most recent season, only played 5 games with Oklahoma State in 2024. Here he is talking about his knee.
I got a contact injury to my knee. It was a MCL tear. Healed from it. Didn't have to have surgery. And I went into combine 100%. Senior Bowl was 100% as well. And I'm feeling great right now. So I'm ready to get after it and ready just to prove my name and show the world what I'm about. So.
All right, Nick Martin says his knee is 100%. Very much like Michael Williams said, his ankle is now 100%. We do have a text that came in a bit ago on the Boxer and Gersten Work Injury Attorneys text line because Upton Stout also missed a handful of games a couple of years ago with an injury that says, why do the 49ers always have an affinity to injured or injury-prone players? It is a fair question for a way. I think we're thinking a little bit past this current iteration of the Niners. Maybe it's more of a Trent Baalke thing where he would make a point, it felt like, to draft guys coming off of ACL injuries. There are some injuries to, I would guess, to the majority of the players the Niners have drafted so far. But I think the one thing that we can say, Sterling, is you're a football player. You're going to have injuries at some point. Just because you had one does not mean you're injury prone. But there is that concern. But you are also football players, and you're very rarely is there a player that gets through years of football without some sort of injury that costs them at least a handful of games.
And it's important to point out that Upton Stout missed 6 games, not last year, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So it wasn't 2024, it was 2023. Nicholas Martin did miss time this past year with the knee injury, but Alfred Collins was healthy. He really hasn't missed any time over the course of 5 seasons. And Micah Williams played through his injury, which he said wasn't a good idea, but it got him a first-round pick at 11. So, and sticking with Micah Williams for a second, if he wasn't healthy and he was that powerful and that strong, imagine what he can do when the ankle's right. Like, that's a strong dude coming off the edge. But there's also a big difference in, and I've seen this so much over the last 24 hours or so. Oh, Michael is Javon Kinlaw. He's Drake Jackson. He saw him in Thomas. He's going to be a bust. He's so different from every single one of those players in so many different ways. One, there's not chronic knee injuries. He's not injury prone, but he just happened to get hurt. Nick Bosa gets hurt sometimes. George Kittle gets hurt sometimes. Or Brock Purdy gets hurt sometimes.
Fred Warner gets hurt sometimes.
No.
Yeah.
Right. And we praise Fred for gutting it out last year with the ankle injury. We can praise Michael Williams for doing the exact same thing last year at Georgia. And, you know, what happened to Drake Jackson was an NFL injury. It wasn't a collegiate injury. That was kind of it happens, it sucks, it stinks. And, you know, there are really no similarities at all from Michael Williams to every other quote-unquote bust defensive lineman San Francisco has taken the last couple of years or so. So let's erase that from the memory. Balky's gone. He doesn't have a job currently, and these guys are not injury prone. They just happen to have been injured at certain times in their career.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, there's been too many instances of the 49ers drafting like a relatively big name in college, and they don't even see the field for the 49ers. But you're right, that was more so a bulky thing than this current iteration of the 49ers. They've had their very high-profile misses in the draft, and I don't even need to go through and name them. We know who they are. But they have there's a lot of them. But they've for almost every single one of those high-profile misses, Sterling, they have like a 4th round or later round like success story. I mean, Fred Warner was 3rd round, and considering what he is, like that is an amazing steal for the 70th overall pick. But I mean, George Kittle is a 5th round pick. I mean, even DJ Jones that same year in 2017, who's no longer a Niner, but considering he was a 6th round pick, hell of a pick there. Dre Greenlaw was a 5th round pick. Juwan Jennings was a 7th round pick. And then in 2021, like the Trey Lance, that's the Trey Lance pick. And also it's the Aaron Banks, Trey Sermon, Ambry Thomas, Jalen Moore draft, which Jalen Moore is at the 5th round isn't terrible, I guess.
Right.
But again, the first 3 rounds of that draft were a disaster. But then you find a way to make it somewhat manageable, because in the 5th round, you get Diamador Lenore and Talanoa Hufanga and Elijah Mitchell. And at one point in their careers, they were all like starters and really good players for you on your team. So like they've had their successes late. And then, of course, I mean, the one that takes the cake over everybody else is the quarterback that's about to be paid upwards of $50, $55, $60 million a year, who was the last pick in the draft in 2022. So, like, yeah, they have had their high-profile misses, but they've also had some hits on day 3 of the draft, and day 3 is coming up tomorrow. And we will begin to look ahead to day 3 coming up in a little bit and what the plan should be for the 49ers. But as we zoom out for a second, Sterling, on just these 4 picks specifically, again, Michael Williams, defensive end from Georgia, Alfred Collins, defensive tackle from Texas, Nick Martin, linebacker from Oklahoma State, and Upton Stout, cornerback from Western Kentucky. 4 picks in, 3 rounds done, Sterling, in the 2025 NFL Draft. I'm not asking you to give a letter grade. You can give it if you want. But overall, these 4 picks, as a 49er fan, how are you feeling about this draft so far?
The first 2 picks, you feel incredible. You get 2 stout run defenders, arguably fix the biggest weakness of this defense.
2 stout run defenders, and then you also get Upton Stout, a corner. Am I right?
If it wasn't meant to be, what else was it supposed to be, Mark? The first two picks you feel great about. I think Alfred Collins is going to be awesome in San Francisco. There's a lot of comparisons to Javon Kinlaw, but Javon Kinlaw as a healthy player is a pretty good one. But to me, Alfred Collins can develop into a good pass rusher. So you like those first two picks. I told you, we got on the air and I was like, this is incredible, Mark. This is awesome. We're so back. But while there are some questions with Nicholas Martin and Upton Stout, I think if you believe in the coaching staff, if you believe in Robert Saleh and what he likes to do, who he likes to pick, and you believe in what he can get out of these players, you have no reason to, I think, at least if you want to give a letter grade, not give it a B. And a B is a really good place to, well, I guess B, entering day 3 with 7 more picks on the board in what has been almost the best day for San Francisco in this entire regime's history. So I think you're in a good place. You have some questions, but overall, you have 4 picks that can be contributors for you in the near future, if not day 1.
Yeah, this will bleed into what the plan for day 3 should be, and we got to take a break here in a couple minutes. But 4 picks in, you've got 2 on the defensive line, an edge, an end, and a tackle on the defensive line. You got a linebacker, and you've got a cornerback. You and I spent a lot of time, not just the last 2 nights, but even throughout the course of the regular season on overtime, talking about the offensive line. Are you concerned? One, are you surprised? Because I don't think you're surprised. 2, are you concerned that through 3 rounds, through 2 days, there's been no upgrades, or not even upgrades, just any backups and any help at all for the offensive line through 3 rounds?
Not shocked, not surprised, and this is what they do. They find those guys on day 3 that you like, that sit for a year, and they find their replacements 1 year prior. Colton McKivitz being one of those who took McGlinchey's spot when he left for Denver. They don't mind developing offensive linemen for a couple of years and then watching them grow. Ben Barch is one of those guys now. Matt Hennessy could be one of those guys. Drake Nugent could be one of those guys this year. But I do think that they have to pick somebody. You can't walk in the next year like this team does not have a swing tackle.
Yeah.
It's Austin Peasants. Who the hell is Austin Peasants?
Someone's going to get hurt, Sterling. Someone's going to get hurt. It's going to happen.
And so you can look at Logan Brown, who was a tackle from Kansas, and Marcus Bowe. Like, there are players out there that can help you on the interior at the tackle position that I think San Francisco should target and will target. Miles Frazier from LSU, guys they had in the building for top 30 visits. So not shocked, not surprised, but eagerly anticipating when that first one comes out the board tomorrow.
Yeah, me too. And it begins 9 a.m. Pacific. If you're out east, noon. The Niners' first pick in the 4th round is the 11th pick in the 4th round. It's 113th overall, so pretty early, of course, in the 4th round. They also have a compensatory pick at the tail end of that 4th round. They've got 2 picks in the 5th. They don't have their own 5th pick, but they have a pick courtesy of Washington, 9th in the 5th. They have a pick in the 5th via Minnesota, the 24th pick in the 5th, and then they have their own pick in the 7th, the 11th pick in that round, and then 2 comp picks late in the 7th. So 2 picks in the 4th, 2 picks in the 5th, and 3 picks in the 7th. Would not be shocked if we see them maybe take a couple of those picks, consolidate into one more valuable pick or something like that. We shall see. But currently, the Niners have made 4 picks. They have 7 more remaining. Those 7 will all take place tomorrow during day 3, the final day of the 2025 NFL Draft. Okay, time for a break. When we come back, more on the game plan for day 3 of the NFL Draft for the San Francisco 49ers. This is also your last opportunity to get in on draft night number 2 here on 95.7 The Game. Any questions, any concerns, any thoughts? You excited? You worried? You didn't like the reach for Nick Martin or for Upton Stout? Let us know. You can call, you can text, you can hit us up on YouTube, 888-957-9570, and on YouTube, youtube.com/957 The Game. It's Sterling Bennett, Marc Grandi with you. We'll wrap things up next right here on 95.7 The Game.
the spot for me, just seeing all the playmakers they had and all the dogs. And I'm just like, if I'm able to feed off them, I could be a great player. So I was excited once John Lynch told me he was on the phone. I was just turned up and pumped.
Now back to draft night on 95.7 The Game.
That was newest Niner quarterback Upton Stout out of Western Kentucky saying when he came to visit the Niners on his 30 visit, he knew this was the spot for him. And once he saw his phone ring and John Lynch popped up on draft night, he was excited. And that is, it's good to hear. Upton Stout, newest Niner quarterback out of Western Kentucky. He was the Niners' last pick of the day, 100 overall, a third-round pick, a compensatory pick for the Niners at the very tail end of that third round. Their fourth and final pick of the first 2 days. They still have 7 more draft selections to make tomorrow, at least currently. They could trade away a couple of those. They could, acquire more. We shall see the way it all works out. But they've made 4 picks through 2 days so far. Mykel Williams, defensive end, Georgia. Alfred Collins, defensive tackle, Texas. Nick Martin, linebacker, Oklahoma State. And who you just heard from, Upton Stout, cornerback from Western Kentucky. As we welcome you back to draft night here on 95.7 The Game. Marc, Grandi, and Sterling Bennett with you. So, Sterling, we now, flip our attention toward day 3 of the NFL draft, rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7. Again, the Niners have 7 picks currently in the final 4 rounds. They got 2 picks, in round 4, 2 picks in round 5, and 3 picks in round 7. Nothing currently in round 6. What should the game plan be for the Niners? Is this essentially first 2 days are defense only, and then you begin thinking about offense in day 3? No offensive line help just yet. I would imagine they're going to pick somebody at some point on the offensive line coming up tomorrow. You feel like they might go running back. This is a very deep running back class as well. You think they could use another wide receiver, but they also feel like they could use a little bit more help on the defensive line. Maybe they add a safety as well. What do you think the Niners' plan of attack should be heading into day 4? Because there's still plenty of help that this roster needs.
Everything. But realistically,
you're right.
I do think there are some pieces on the defensive line. We've talked a lot tonight about you've got your run stoppers, you got your run stuffers, you got to get the pass rushers on the interior as well. Your defensive line with the guys you already had in place, their archetypes are run stoppers. Evan Anderson, Jordan Elliott, Clea Davis is kind of the only interior guy that can get to the quarterback, and even then, he doesn't play, ever, because he's always hurt. So I look at players like Joshua Farmer from Florida State, Aeneas Peebles from Virginia Tech, probably earlier tomorrow. Farmer probably goes pretty quick on day 3, and Peebles probably in round 5, if you're lucky. I do think if you want to talk about things that they do actually on like the offensive side of things, receiver, they're set in my opinion. You have Pearsall, you have Jennings, you're going to get Ayuk back in November. Demarcus Robinson may or may not get suspended for 3 games. I don't know what's happening there. Maybe he's kind of better. You have Isaiah Hodgins and Tariq Owens. Like there's some pieces.
Jacob Cowling.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how long that lasts. I do like him, but you just didn't play much last year. But I do like him a lot. But I do think that running back, you traded away Jordan Mason. When you do that, you are now reliant on an older and an injury. I don't want to call him prone, but there have been some injuries with Christian McCaffrey, especially last year, the Achilles in the PCL. Then Isaac Rendo, who has never played a full season in the NFL or at college. So I think you have to find the other guy in that room. You like Patrick Taylor as your 4th guy, as your 5th guy off the practice squad. Israel Benaconda's there, but who cares about that guy? I think running back is certainly a place you could look at. Running back to me is something there's very easy players to point to and say, that's a Kyle Shanahan guy. And I have a few for you.
Okay.
That I think could fit here in San Francisco. My favorite of the group is DJ Giddens from Kansas State. He's a bigger body guy. He can replace Jordan Mason. Isn't a receiver, hence why you have Christian McCaffrey and Isaac Guerrero. But if you want more of that dual threat player, you can go to Brashard Smith from SMU, give you more of the receiver threat. I also believe that there may be a reality where San Francisco says, we have Kyle Shanahan. The UDFAs are going to come rolling in at running back, and we're going to find 4 guys who are studs. Jadon Blue from Texas, Devin Neal from Kansas in that grouping, Khalil Mullings from Michigan could be a guy for you. So there are some pieces you can put in place. The offensive line, Marcus Bowe, certainly a pick from Purdue you can put in there. There are, knowing they've gone so defensive heavy, they just have to make the right defensive pick, and it's along that pass rushing line, whereas you have to get a running back now. My father texted me today as we were talking and said, what are they doing on the offensive line? Like, what's happening? Question. And his words, not mine. He goes, they've done nothing to protect Brock Purdy. And I responded, well, they didn't gut the offensive line for a reason. They like who they have. And he goes, yeah, but they all suck, so why does it matter? I mean, it's like, I can't respond to that and be logical here. So there are some holes. Again, they like developmental pieces on the offensive line. So those first couple picks, what is it, like 113 and like 160 and 147?
Niners pick 113, 138, 147, 160.
Okay, so there is some places to move around there. You can get an edge rusher, Jaw Joyner, Ahmed Hassanan from Boise State, wrestler background, similar to Micah Williams. There are some pieces in place, so there's a lot of ways they can go. I think they've filled almost kind of other holes, per se, but that pass rushing defensive tackle has to be one of the pieces they bring home tomorrow.
So 7 picks tomorrow. You got to think at least one is another edge and one, or at least end, and one is another defensive tackle, and then offensive line, maybe running back. You feel pretty good about the wide receiver room. Maybe they go tight end. They go with safety as well, and then maybe for good measure they mix in another defensive tackle or a defensive end. We shall see. But I mean,
maybe it's a quarterback.
I mean, maybe I don't think it's ever a bad idea to just take a swing at some quarterback in like the 6th or 7th round. Maybe
McCord, Max Brosmer, Shadur Sanders. He'll probably be there come Mr. Relevant.
He might be.
At this point, so you never know.
He might be. Niners' last pick currently is 252, set in the 7th round. The 36th pick in that round. Is that the very last pick in the draft? 7th round?
So,
no, it's not. There's 5 picks after him. The last pick in this year's draft is 257, owned by the Kansas City Chiefs. There's 41 picks in the 7th round this year with all the compensatory draft selections going on there. Niners have the 33rd pick in the 7th round and the 36th pick in the 7th round. So they have 2 chances to pick someone very, very near the tail end of this draft. My issue with the offensive line, Sterling, isn't necessarily anything that they've done this offseason, for example. Like, I don't think letting Aaron Banks walk was a bad thing. I think the cost benefit analysis that they run there is, well, he's not worth that money. Whoever left, I'm drawing a blank on the name, to Kansas City, Jalen Moore, right? To Kansas City, as essentially he was a Niners swing tackle, and the Chiefs are now paying him starting tackle money. Frankly, I don't think he's worth that either. So I don't have an issue with the Niners letting either of those guys leave the building. Like, that just seems like smart business to me. Like, don't pay guys what they're not what they're worth. Like, okay, that's fine. I just feel like, Sterling, if I could have seen a situation like this arising years ago, then the Niners should have seen it as well. And maybe the reason why is simply what you're laying out. They feel really good about Ben Barch and Jake Brendel and Colton McKivitz, and hell, they feel all right about Matt Hennessy and Nick Zakel and Austin Pleasance and Drake Nugent or whoever it is. Maybe they feel good about those guys, and I think most people probably don't feel that good about those guys. Maybe that's the reason, and that's what explains it all away. And if that happens and Jake Brendel moves on or retires or whatever, and they don't extend McKivitz beyond this year or whatever it is, and, Zakel fills in, Pleasance fills in, and they become really good players, like, okay, I'll eat my words. I will have earned it. But my issue, Sterling, isn't, again, what's happened right now. It is, the offensive line market is crazy. It's kind of like every market right now across the NFL, honestly. You've had to pay Brock Purdy this offseason, coming up for a few years now. You knew that Aaron Banks was going to become a free agent, and maybe you felt better about him after the previous season. Maybe you felt better about him after two years ago as opposed to right now. And okay, I would buy that. I just feel like the Niners could have felt that not necessarily a reckoning was coming, but the moment was coming where there were going to be some guys on the offensive line that were leaving their building, and considering what they were going to have to pay to some of their other players, including their quarterback this offseason, they should have been a little more prepared for this moment. And it kind of felt like they got caught a little surprised by the way this all played out, and now they're going to an offensive line that frankly feels a little bit patchwork, and they haven't done a lot in the draft. In fact, they've done nothing in the draft at this point to address it. But even if they make a pick or two tomorrow, it feels like not a lot because they were day 3 picks. And maybe I'm proven wrong. Maybe this is going to turn out to be a good offensive line, but I just can't yet buy it. And I think my issue, Sterling, isn't what has happened in the last couple of months. It is what has happened or what hasn't happened over the last 2 years.
Well, it's funny because it seems like the only time San Francisco ever invests a high-end pick in the offensive line is when somebody else is leaving, they don't want to pay. The biggest example is Lake and Tomlinson, right? You go draft Aaron Banks, you try to move him to right guard, doesn't work out. You have Daniel Brunskill there. Tomlinson leaves, you don't want to pay him big money. You have Aaron Banks, which was a good decision on their end. Tomlinson's still playing, but he's an older player and hasn't played great in recent seasons. And Aaron Banks, for 2 of the 3 years he started, was serviceable, if not good, at left guard. They didn't really replace Joe Staley. They just went and got Trent Williams on a 3rd-round pick. They have McGlinchey, who is the lone spot where they just drafted a guy outright, but they went and got Colt McKivitz, who developed for a handful of years, paid him on a 2-year contract, 3-year contract, and said, you're the guy now. So I think tomorrow you will see a tackle off the board for them, a guy that can probably play inside here or there and give you that flexibility. Whether it is Chase Lund from UConn, a guy, because they're not going to want to pay Colt McKivitz. It's too big of a contract. They want to cut some funding here. They want to be, I don't want to call it cheap, but they're already gutting the defense. They don't want to pay some right tackle $10 million per year. So you're going to find somebody get picked tomorrow, and that's going to be the guy you say, well, when Colt McKivitz leaves next offseason, that's the replacement. But they never have ever invested on the offensive line with draft picks when they didn't have someone to replace a year down the road. Obviously, you have Trent Williams, but even Jake Brendel was brought in under Alex Mack, and then Mack retires, and Brendel swoops in as kind of a whatever acquisition during an offseason and becomes a starter. So I think your frustration, unfortunately, is like never going to change. It's really annoying.
I know.
But this is just the way they do things out there in San Francisco. I know a lot of fans wanted Drew Dahlman this offseason, center from Atlanta, but Jake Brendel's under contract for 3 more seasons. Not too expensive, but that stuff matters for them. So I think you're going to find a 5th-round pick, a tackle, probably somewhere that can play the interior. But ultimately, I would not bank on 2, 3, 4 offensive line picks and you say, oh, it's rehauled, we're back. It'll be, okay, but that really wasn't enough.
Yeah.
That is kind of always going to be what you see during draft day for them.
Yeah, no, I just don't really get it. And like, I don't have a problem, again, like letting Aaron Banks walk and letting Jalen Moore walk. Like, okay, that's
This is $72 million.
So much money.
What are you doing, Green Bay?
They're not worth that. Neither of them are.
No.
I mean, with the contract that Jalen Moore got either, he's not worth that either. But I also understand, like, it's not like you can just go out there on the free agent market and sign, like, a star tackle. Like, that just doesn't happen. Because if you have a really good tackle, it is one of the most important pieces on your roster. if you draft a tackle that turns out to be good, they almost never hit free agency. Like, the teams that draft those dudes, you just sign them. It's why the Trent Williams acquisition was a godsend. And, I mean, maybe other than the Brock Purdy draft pick, like maybe the singular best move that this franchise under John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have made, because they literally replaced like a franchise legend, arguably Hall of Fame offensive lineman, left tackle Joe Staley, with maybe one of the best left tackles of all time. Like, an incredible move. But you know
never
how
happens that way.
Yeah, it never happens. You know how rare that is? One, to have a great left tackle, he retires, and to replace him with an even better one, like, that doesn't happen. But the fact that a left tackle, any offensive lineman of that caliber is available, it like rarely ever happens. And then when that does happen, the fact that you are the team that is able to acquire him is even less likely. So if we're operating from the standpoint of being able to acquire like a proven offensive lineman is like frankly nearly impossible, the only way to get good offensive linemen onto your team in a consistent fashion is to draft them. And for a team that maybe not so much of late, but definitely is leaning back into it this year, but for the teams whose game plan was when they first got to San Francisco, and I'm talking specifically about Shanahan and Lynch, was to build from the trenches out, I feel like they haven't really done that consistently on the offensive line. And I think it's a major oversight. I really, and I can't get over it. And I know what you're going to say. It's they just disagree. And I am in total agreement with you. I just, for the life of me, can't possibly see what they see in the offensive line. And again, considering the way that offensive line works in the NFL, if you have a good one, you just don't let them get to free agency. The only consistent way to get talent in your O-line room is to draft them. And I'm talking about draft picks like before day 3. And they just don't do it consistently. When they do it consistently, they get starters. Like Aaron Banks, say what you want, started for them for a few years. Dominic Pooty's likely going to be a starter at right guard for years. I mean, you go back even further to Mike McGlinchey. I mean, yeah, again, maybe not the best, and maybe you wish you could have gotten a little bit more for a top 10 pick. But, I mean, he was your starter for years. When they have used those picks on offensive linemen, generally, they've gotten decent production. And now I feel like as a result, they're not going to get as good of production. And I know they're not using as many resources on it. So you're able to help the team out elsewhere. I just think it's a major oversight in this regime's overall like planning for how to build a successful roster.
Well, and it's compounded by the fact that the Rams have a really good defensive line. Philadelphia just tore to pieces Kansas City's offensive line, which was heralded as one of the best on the interior. And the answer San Francisco has to watching that isn't, we got to take 4 offensive linemen and beef up the trenches on the offensive side. It's, let's do that too on defense and see how that works. And it's like, okay, like, yes, I agree with you that you need to have Micah Williams and Alfred Collins, and that's great. And I'm happy for those guys and happy they're in San Francisco. They're going to be good players, hopefully for a long time. But usually the response when, a new thing takes over the NFL, whether it's a scheme change, like, when teams when the Wildcat came into the NFL, Ronnie Brown, Ricky Williams, other teams didn't start running the Wildcat too. They said, how do we stop the Wildcat? And so for the Niners, you would like the response to be, okay, yes, get your defense beefed up, sure, bring back Saleh, but maybe the response should be get a better center, better left guard, better right tackle, insulate yourself because someone's going to go down. And there's a reason as to why Philadelphia has won 2 Super Bowls since 2018. It's the same offensive line the whole time. They bring those guys back. They make sure to insulate themselves, draft good replacements early on day 2. And look, San Francisco has had a lot of success in their own right doing things their way and arguably should have 2 rings to prove it. However, they don't. And the NFL is changing. The winds of a change are coming, and you don't want to be left behind. In San Francisco, it feels like it's trying to play catch up on defense, where you may find yourself sitting back in 2025 saying, well, now in 2026, got to play catch up on offensive line too. So what they've done so far is good, but it does show you that San Francisco has a lot of work to be done, and you hope on day 3 tomorrow that they can find the few high-end prospects still remaining to improve the offensive line this season.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, we got a couple minutes left with you here on draft night number 2 here on 95.7 The Game. Sterling Bennett, Marc, Grandi with you. Unfortunately, we won't have day 3 coverage of the draft here for you on 95.7 The Game because we do have Warriors basketball coming up tomorrow. We'll have Warriors this week from 9 to noon as always. And then I've got you covered for Warriors Live beginning not an hour before tip-off as usual, but an hour and a half. The tip-off is at 5:30, Game 3, Warriors-Rockets from Chase Center. A 5:30 tip, which means Warriors Live a full hour before a half-hour network pregame. I'll be live from Chase Center beginning at 4 tomorrow here on 95.7 The Game to get you ready for Warriors and Rockets. But Sterling, final thoughts before we get on out of here. Let's focus specifically on the Niners' first pick in the 4th round tomorrow, 113th overall. The 11th pick in tomorrow's 4th round. I know you've thrown out a bunch of names for guys that they should target in general in day number 3, but specifically 11 picks away, Sterling. Give us a few names that the Niner fans should be keeping an eye on for who the Niners might go with there. A position, a couple of positions to keep an eye on, and a few names. Who do you think is high on the Niners list for that 113th pick, 11th pick in the 4th round tomorrow when we get underway at 9 a.m.?
Let's start on the offensive line, since that's been the predominant conversation in the last 5 minutes or so. I think Purdue offensive lineman Marcus Bowe is a player San Francisco will likely target or at least has some interest in. Okay. He was in for a top 30 visit. He can play tackle. He can play guard. He can play center. He is that smaller guy that's versatile, that's got a quick first step. But like every right tackle or every guard and center in San Francisco's history under Kyle Shanahan, the anchor is a problem, but that to me means he'll probably be a San Francisco 49er tomorrow when the pick is made. Some more players are there. Logan Brown, Kansas tackle. So maybe they go the Dominic Pooney, same pipeline route. They can get into maybe the Chase Lunt conversation, a bigger tackle. He fits the archetype better on the offensive line. If you want to go on the edge rushing group, we talked plenty about them to pair with Micah Williams, this year's first-round pick. There's players like Elijah Roberts from SMU. He can play inside, he can play outside. Ahmed Hassanein, probably going to be a later day 3 pick, but he is San Francisco, likes him a lot. He's from Egypt, came over to America when he was in high school. He's a CrossFit athlete, wrestler, fits really what they like to do out of Boise State. And then there's players like Braden Swinson from LSU, who was at times talked about being a first-round pick in this year's draft, a 6'4", 255, eerily similar to Micah Williams' height and weight. But he has a 32.6 pass rush win rate, so it could be a top-end player still on the board for them on day 3. He doesn't have the power, but he has the bend, the speed, the quickness, so a good parallel or a good kind of a balancing of nature for Micah Williams to get Braden Swinson there from LSU.
Awesome. All right, so offensive line or defensive tackle or edge, those are the spots that Sterling is looking for, and I can't argue with that. I mean, they've made 4 picks. All have been on defense, 2 on the defensive line. They need more help there, and we just spent 20 minutes talking about the offensive line. So clearly, we both think that they can use some help on the offensive line as well. Sterling, that's all we have time for today. It's been great hanging out with you for the last couple of nights. 4 picks down, 7 more to go for the 49ers tomorrow. Unfortunately, Sterling and I will not be back tomorrow for draft coverage, but you can give Sterling a follow on Twitter at 49ers_access. He will have coverage for you there, and there's very few out there that do it better than Sterling, so you can follow along for him there on social media. Sterling, it's been great hanging out with you, and maybe we'll catch up again at some point in the offseason, and if not, perhaps we got overtime once again. We'll have to wait and see come the fall.
Sounds like an awful lot of fun, Mark. And I hope we get to do it again this season.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. All right, that's Sterling Bennett. I'm Marc Grandi. Shout out to our guys behind the glass, Steven Risotto and Cam Williams as well, making us sound good here on this Friday night. And thanks to all of you for tuning in the last couple of nights right here on 95.7 The Game. We've got Warriors basketball for you tomorrow. We'll kick it off with Warriors this week, 9 a.m. to noon, and then I'll be on the air live at 4 from Chase Center to get you ready for tip-off at 5:30 between the Warriors and the Rockets. Game 3, a pivotal Game 3. Jimmy Butler questionable. Is he going to play? You have to tune in to find out. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great rest of your Friday night, and we'll talk tomorrow right here on 95.7 The Game.
I'm David.
I'm John.
And I'm Chris. We're the three brothers that own Jack's Restaurant and Bar with 5 locations.